Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Star Wars Lads for this week's live Q&A and news discussion. Hopefully, you're all having a great evening. If that's the hour and a half to 2 hours we go for these streams, and if you're just watching on replay, thank you for watching. Hopefully, you can join us next week as we continue to count down the weeks towards Andor. We're officially 2 weeks away from today when Andor starts, and it has been confirmed, officially by Disney, and they posted a schedule. It will be a 4-week-long thing. We want to get your guys' feedback too as we creep closer, and I think I'll just keep bringing it up every stream on our strategy for doing these streams about Andor. I'd imagine most people want to do them on Wednesday, considering we're getting 3, hopefully hour and a half-ish long a week amounts of television. 3 episodes, about 45 minutes, hopefully each. So if we're getting an hour and a half to 2 hours of television every week, it's kind of hard for everybody to get to that immediately. But if you guys want to do a stream on Tuesday nights, we can do that because it would be a similar time to these streams that we do right now. It'd be probably about 7:30 to 8 p.m. Pacific for us. So we can do that and accommodate that. But I know a lot of other people might not work in their schedule, especially those on the East Coast or in other parts of the world. So let us know in the chat if that works for you. I'll put up a poll today. I'm going to put up a poll next week as we continue to get, thing for our the chance to join us. Join us and discuss about whatever the latest is in and for Andor every single week. So make sure you let us know about that. We're going to talk about some news stories this week. Last week, of course, the day after we go live, we had the biggest news of the week. Tales of the Underworld gets announced. We did a trailer reaction. If you haven't seen our trailer reaction, posted it on the channel last Wednesday. So if you'd like to check out our reaction to the trailer, specifically me watching it for the first time, both of our thoughts on the trailer, you can check out that video. We're going to discuss Tales of the Underworld a little bit today. Sanak sent in a brief reaction, so I'm going to give him a little bit more time to talk about some things, and then also talk about some things that we learned over the last 7 days since that trailer went out. We're going to talk about some of the new stuff from Andor Season 2. There was a new TV spot posted today, some more interviews. We're getting a lot of marketing and anticipation and hype towards this show, so lots more stuff to discuss, but a few different things here and there throughout the new footage we've gotten that will show us different sides of the show, but similar tone. We're keeping that. And then we're going to talk about the Revenge of the Sith Deluxe Edition. We talked about it last week. It was announced last week or discovered last week by people who were searching through Penguin Random House's page, who they had some postings and they were eventually taken down. One of them was the Revenge of the Sith novelization deluxe edition for the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith. We are going to talk about the specifics of that. We talked about how it was $60 price tag last week. We're going to tell you why through the news this week, as well as a few other things that are here and there. But this is a stream that is dedicated to taking your guys' questions. So keep sending in the questions and the comments into the chat. If they are topical about the specific topics we are going through, we'll incorporate them in the discussion. If not, they will be first come, first serve. It is Ask Us Anything. So it doesn't have to be on topic. It can be about anything you want. It doesn't have to be Star Wars related. It can also be anything in regards to pop culture, movies, anything you'd like to discuss in that realm. And then super chats will bump you up to the top, as well as if you are a member of Rebel tier or higher in our Patreon and YouTube membership programs, you will get chat priority access. If you're a member of that tier in our YouTube memberships, you should have a specific type of way you can send in a chat that will allow you to do that. If you're Patreon, you have to go on the link that we are on Patreon, that we posted on our Patreon page, and then you can comment below. If you're a member of that tier, you will get a specific post. So all that housekeeping out of the way as people continue to trickle in here tonight. Let's get to our first story, and it is Tales of the Underworld. Even though it is a week old now at this point, the news, it is the biggest thing we got this week for Star Wars. So this is our third Tales of series. It's our second year in a row we are getting one on May the 4th. Last year, it was heavily rumored that we were getting Tales of the Jedi Season 2. And so when Tales of the Empire came out or was announced, it wasn't that surprising to me because I expected Tales of the Jedi Season 2. And it was just, it was basically that, but, with new characters, different tone, different time period, different factions, different people. Now we are getting the Underworld, and it's returning its focus on popular characters. The season one, if you want Tales of the Jedi, Ahsoka, Dooku. Tales of the Empire, it was Barriss and it was Morgan Elsbeth, two characters not necessarily as popular amongst the larger Star Wars fan base, and both stories didn't necessarily connect to the Empire as much. Well, with Tales of the Underworld, we're getting serious connections. Obviously, first our main character, we're getting Cad Bane. He is a basically the face of the Star Wars underworld outside of Boba Fett. He has been since 2008. So it is really exciting to get a story about him and some of his origins as well. That one's kind of the Dooku-esque story of the two because it is the one telling his backstory. So that'll be really cool. Hopefully it lives up to the hype. And then we got Ventress, who was a bounty hunter and part of the underworld and has been working, under the nose of the Empire as we see in the Bad Batch. Will we learn about her resurrection or not in this season? Is this all we're getting from her? There are a lot of questions opened up here. I kind of made my thoughts known about that. I mean, we both have for a year or so since the Bad Batch season 3 came out, and we barely got anything from her in that season, but it just felt underwhelming, but it did feel like they were setting her up for more. I personally, like I said in the video, I'm be very disappointed if this is it for her. If we're gonna do an abrupt, abridged Tales of the Underworld retelling of how she survives and just for one little story, and then she's cast off away into future stories, but there's no real concrete plans. Hopefully, we learn more about a possible series in the future. But Sonic, I'm going to give you some time to talk about Tales of the Underworld because you sent in a briefer reaction to it. What were your thoughts on the trailer overall and some of the other things we've learned about this series as we've progressed in about the week since it came out?
Yeah, I think still pretty even keel about it. I'm not expecting anything fantastic or superb because at the end of the day, these are short episodes, right? And that's the biggest struggle I have with it. Because I think the Tales of sort of works as like, stories that are equipped to enable a slightly better understanding or like filling in gaps, right? It's not supposed to be like, oh, capturing the entire essence of a character. And when that makes sense, it's like Count Dooku's story. You've already got him in so much other media. Obviously, we've got that script version with him too, that the Ventress story with her perspective, learning about his history, right? That's a fantastic, you do it's just a fantastic book because, you're able to understand his whole story and because it's also in an audio drama form, it has a little bit more elevated like importance to how it's presented, kind of paced really nicely too. And then his episodes from Tales of the Jedi showed that same downfall. Yes, it's like a bit of a summarization, but it's not trying to replace it. It's not trying to be the end all be all. It's just things that you can file in alongside this book, alongside the other medium. So I thought that was great. You don't have to love the Ahsoka ones. I don't, right? I think I like the origin episode, and then that's kind of it. Like the rest, I'm like, that's fine. It's interesting to see stuff like that again. Especially with a character that is so heavily developed in animation that's had so much screen time now for the last 15, 20 years. But, it still works the same way. You're not trying to replace, you're not trying to say this is the most important story told about this character. This is the heaviest weight applied to this character. It's like, yeah, okay, these are things that can filter in, add a little bit better understanding. These are tales from their life. The problem that I felt with Tales of the Empire was, 1, it felt a bit misleading as a title. It wasn't really about the Imperials, and if it was kind of the fringes. It was like the very beginning where we kinda got these Inquisitors, the failed Jedi, stuff like that. Obviously, with Barriss, and Barriss herself turns good by the end, which, I don't mind, but that's a rich storyline. That's something that we've been waiting for over a decade, right? It's been a long time since season 5 of the Clone Wars where, people who are huge EU fans of her with the MedStar duology and all that, like, what happened to this character? Even if it felt like it was well performed, all that's like, well, I wanna know more. I wanna know her headspace leading to that. I wanna know if things happen to cause that sort of instance, right? For some reason, it felt like this 3 episodes for her were like, "Let's try to pack, like, the entire arc of, like, turning bad and then turning good again," and in the novel. Instead, you could have done something where, like, okay, here's something that happened during the Clone Wars. Here's during, like, the turning period of, like, that first episode, and then you can maybe jump into the future where she, like, slips away and she's like, "Okay, like, this is not it for me, I need to walk away." And then you could still fill that out with a book and all that. To then jump to her, like, healer storyline again to almost, like, remerge her EU characterization, her Clone Wars characterization, it didn't feel like you're telling tales, like, it's like you're saying this is the tale of that entire time period, which it's way too compressed to say, so I hope obviously it gets, like, a script book or some sort of extended media to make that storyline richer, deeper, longer. I mean, the whole time of it is just also very confusing. We don't know how many years it's been. Is it the force healing that's aging her? Is it just the environment? There's a lot of questions still, right? So, definitely a weird one there. And then does she die? I don't know. It's a weird one, right? And then I just didn't I like Morgan Elsbeth a lot in Ahsoka, don't get me wrong, but other than that first episode, what do I really care about her? And the most potent episode that could have been there was the last one, was set in the New Republic, and all it was like, here's the 5 minutes before, her appearance in Mandalorian season 2. It's like, well, that's not great either, right? It's like you're trying to just say this is the entire arc of her story. It's like, no, like it doesn't even feel like chapters that could be fleshed out with bigger, better stories, longer stories. It's just like, now this is it. So I really didn't like that. I didn't like it. Didn't really fit the name there. So I definitely dropped it a good bit. And where Jedi, Tales of the Jedi, even if I don't love that Ahsoka Inquisitor episode, for the most part, I still think it's a very enjoyable. Tales of the Empire, I haven't bothered watching it. I've seen like clips here and there, but it's like okay, one and done. I think here with Tales of the Underworld, they've made a smart choice with who they're picking. You don't have that same issue of, like, timelines, importance of characters to different eras. The Underworld's always gonna be important. There's always gonna be an Underworld. But to go for 2 characters that have become huge faces in animation, who have kind of been able to stretch into multiple shows, in Cad Bane's case too, into live action, I think that's great. I mean, we talk about Ventress of how potent her storyline is, how much she's extended throughout the prequels now. But Cad Bane has kind of gone all the way into that New Republic era too, and you're like, "Okay, well, I wanna know more about this guy." I wouldn't say I necessarily need to know his origin, and I'm very curious how much that they actually shown us from that trailer. Like, it seems like he's kinda got this older figure in his life, and things kinda go wrong, and then he's kinda seeking revenge when he's more of an older seasoned veteran, but not necessarily the Cad Bane of the Clone Wars without all the cybernetics and everything like that. So, I think that's a great draw. You're like, "Okay, like, that's a character that everyone who watches the Clone Wars animation is familiar with." So I think that's gonna be more appealing than Morgan Elsbeth. I think my question is, like, just how much are we gonna get there that is really potent outside of just like, "Okay, we're just gonna do the origin over 3 episodes." Now, if they just do, like, this part of his life leading into his early bounty hunting days and it's, capturing just the transformational period for him instead of saying, "Okay, now we're gonna jump into post, Republic, then we're gonna jump into during the Empire," right? I think that could work, but there's nothing in the trailer so far that indicates that, so a little bit more hesitant on that, honestly, but I still think just because of how iconic he is, how famous he is, how cool he is, I think it should work. I don't really have the same, like, "Oh, these important galaxy-changing things have to happen to these characters," or, like, effect on the Force, effect on, like, relationships with other big characters. No, it's Cad Bane. He can interact with a random bounty hunter. I'm like, "That's cool. I'm happy with that." So don't have that, kind of wait for that storyline that was weighing that could push that down. I think it'll be fun and entertaining. I'm just not sure if he's a character that needs an origin. It almost feels like Han Solo, where you're like, does he need an origin film? I know there's the young Han Solo books, but those still kind of shroud enough of his earlier years, whereas like the Solo movie tries to like piece that all together, connect that all the way into the very first scenes for that film. So that's all to say that Cad Bane, a little worried. Not at all worried, honestly, about Ventress. I really do think we're gonna get everything that we need. I don't think we'll ever get a Dark Disciple fully fleshed, like 40-minute special presentation, special feature, or, the full 8-episode arc. That's out of the picture. If it was a 4-episode arc, maybe, but even then, we don't really have any proof of that happening, right? We've never seen Crystal Crisis and Utapau, which I think arguably is way more important for Anakin and Obi-Wan, especially since they're very minimal in season 6 and season 7 of the Clone Wars compared to Ahsoka, compared to a lot of side characters. That's not gonna get adapted fully. I really doubt Dark Disciple will with Quinlan and Asajj, but the fact that she's back in the Bad Batch, like we both said, it's a weird backdoor pilot, and it didn't really feel too important. It's like, okay, sure, we reaffirmed that Omega doesn't really have the Force or seemingly the Force in the same way others do. She just might have a high midichlorian count, and that's like a step towards Necromancer, like, bringing back Palpatine. But besides that, it's like, okay, why did that happen? Well, animation is always about, bringing the assets as early as possible to then be used later, make it cheaper for yourself later down the line. Cool. If they can at least take those old Dark Disciple animatics that were finished and maybe a couple others and kinda, like, splice them into, like, maybe some weird vision of her reawakening or being reborn, maybe the sleeper is somehow revived or there's another one or there's enough water or life remaining on Dathomir to bring her up. Show all that stuff, put, like, little images of, like, what she's seen or heard, like, the Force visions almost like of, like, Leia saying, like, "Oh, I remember my mother." Clearly not, but there must be something the Force is doing to her. Capture just enough of, like, the more iconic, important moments of Dark Disciple leading into her being electrocuted to death by Dooku, and then go from there, right? It looks like she's got kind of like maybe a Pietro sort of character. I don't know if it is Pietro, it could be someone like him, sort of like a quasi apprentice. She's gonna fight an Inquisitor. All that's cool, but if we don't see exactly why she was revived, what's so different about her now instead of just like, "Oh, she just is a cat with 9 lives," basically, eh, I don't know if I'd love that, but again, for both of these arcs, I just want them to start off with, like, the most potent story and then go from there, kinda stretch out, not try to make a whole character arc, but maybe just slices of life, things that were important to them that other stories have already built off of or are waiting to, like, say, "Hey, this is a book waiting to happen. Oh, here's a extended series." And if maybe, like, the 2nd or 3rd episode of the Ventress one is like, oh, a tease of the path, like, you just see, like, maybe some small origin of that, or, like, her meeting with Quinlan again, and then comes out, or it's a big, like, recurring arcs in, like, Dark Time show, great. I don't think people will have problems with that. I think that would really undo a lot of the weird feelings a lot of us definitely have with Asajj Ventress in The Bad Batch because it's cool, but it's not well done or executed.
Right. And it's like, for me, a lot of people were arguing with me on the reaction. Like, it can work for Ventress to come back. There's lore around it. It's hints at the end of the book. And I've never once said it can't. My problem is should it? And that's what I said to all the people who commented that way on that video was just, I'm still waiting for a reason a Ventress needs to be back. It can't just be a gimmick. And to me, it feels like a gimmick when this character is brought back for one scene in Bad Batch and heavily promoted in the trailer for Bad Batch season 3 after an underwhelming season 2, both in terms of quality and viewership. It just seemed like some type of desperate ploy to get people to watch Bad Batch season 3. Then she doesn't show up till what, like the 10th episode, and she's there one time and it's over. It felt like, let's resurrect this character, harming a story that was really great and a great ending for her. Just that it feels truly like that was worth bringing her back and changing her really great ending. I'm gonna be really mixed on her return. It's not the fact that it can't happen. It's for me my favorite Star Wars books ever. It's one of the best in canon, top 2 or 3 canon book of all time. It's one of the great stories. If it was in the Clone Wars, it would be one of the great arcs of the Clone Wars. And that's kind of the sad thing too, is I feel like if it was part of the Clone Wars, it would be so much more sacred to so many more people, right? All these people, a lot of people take the approach of, oh, why should I care if it's in a book? If it would have been a part of the Clone Wars, then that the fact that she would have been dead for 10 years or more in the Clone Wars would have stood with people longer. It would have had an emotional impact. It would have really been devastating to a lot of people, just like it was to those of us who read the book. And so that for me is the biggest concern I have about Ventress. Now, I'm happy she's in this because the only way to fix it now, you can't retcon the fact that she's back, right? So the only way to fix it is to keep giving her more story. But I'm still not convinced that Tales of the Underworld is going to be the story that I'm like, yes, this was it. This is why Ventress should be back. Because it's too short. Like you said, Sonic, it's only 3 episodes. They're going to be 12 to 16 minutes each. And then after that, I don't really see it being a thing that can crystallize any story for her. But I do think it's something that could start a great story for her. And then if continue it later, if she is a part of this next series, or if she is a part of their future plans, then great. I love that. I think that's a great connective tissue. But if it is just to sell Tales of the Underworld and previously to sell The Bad Batch, I'm going to be really disappointed as a fan who really enjoyed her ending and thought it was important and good and really powerful, both for her character, for the character of Quinlan Voss, for the character of Count Dooku. Now, all of that is kind of changed, and we don't know what it's for yet. So I think it's healthy to be skeptical about that. And I'm not going to argue with any of you that are excited about it. I just personally won't be until I see why they brought her back. But as for Cad Bane, I'm with you. Like, we had two great, or great is maybe the wrong word. We had two examples of ways you can do stretched out time stories. One great in the Count Dooku arc, because that is spread out over, I would imagine, at least about 10 years, 15 years, maybe even longer. And you have that story spread out across a long period of time that gives you just little glimpses into the fall of Dooku and what his thought process was over different periods of his life until ultimately you see his final fall. And that works so well, partially because it's a character we know so well. We already know so much about him, whether it's Dooku Jedi Lost or just the films or the Clone Wars or the old version of the Clone Wars or his stories and legends. You know his personality, you know his character, you know a lot more about him. So it kind of works to get little glimpses into his life. Whereas Barriss, what they did with her in season 5 of the Clone Wars was so completely out of character that like we have to throw away all our legends preconceptions of this character and kind of recontextualize it with okay, what is the story of Barriss and canon? And that's when it didn't work, because you skip over a 10-year period or so where she makes life altering decisions that changes the course of what she was and what she chose. But we don't get to see that. Most of them happen off screen. We just see the pivotal moments. We don't see what led to those pivotal moments. So we have two very starkly contrasting versions of those two characters, or those two types of storytelling, the long form storytelling. So hopefully with Cad Bane, it's at least a full flashback type of thing, or a type of a story that's either a flashback in one episode then connects to something in the present day. I mean, I think from the trailer, from what I saw, it looks like it's going to be that second one. It's going to be partially flashback and it's going to be partially present day. Some people were wanting to say, oh, because of the way he's dressed, it can't be post Bad Batch. Like he has to be wearing certain things. And that's true, but it doesn't mean the shots we saw are the only parts of it we see. And then the StarWars.com article that I detailed in that trailer reaction says that it specifically takes place in the dark times. So I think we'll get a little bit of both, but it'll be interesting to see how they do it. But overall, I mean, I'm excited for it. I feel like I'm coming across as more of a negative Nancy on this whole thing. Like I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be fun, and it's always exciting to get new Star Wars stuff, especially these May the 4th drops. Like I love that. I love the fact that we can celebrate Star Wars with something new every year, and it can be something just as small as this. But Star Wars fans are so dedicated, and we love this franchise so much. We're excited to get stuff like this, and this, doesn't get me as hyped as a new show starting, but it is a pretty exciting product, especially when we look at, what is it now, 3 years ago we got Tales of the Jedi, 3 or 4, um and so we have that as the benchmark of what these series can be. And even if we did take a misstep with Tales of the Empire, if this one's great, 2/3 of the shows will be awesome from these Tales of, and I still want more. I think they can do so many great things, and they don't always have to do it with characters like Cad Bane and Ventress, characters that we know really well. I think inherently that works a little better when you're giving glimpses into different people's lives, but I think you can do characters that are small, you can do characters who don't get much screen time and just show a cool moment in their life. You just can't give them a life-changing arc.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tales of the Empire, both characters change dramatically, and you don't really see why, especially Barris. So, yeah, so I think they're still figuring out the formula, but I think this is more on track for what we should be excited for. I do hope they give us season 2s of all these shows, though. Like, they don't if the next one is Tales of the Bounty Hunters or Tales, of the New Republic or Tales of the Old Republic, they can keep doing that. Tales of the High Republic, I wouldn't be surprised if we ever got it. They can keep doing that and keep shifting the different eras, but, I think there's so much richness, especially in each of these names, that you could start giving us these 2, 3 times a year, different drops, and giving us season 2s of Tales of the Jedi with new characters, and I would love to see that. Hopefully, that happens, in the future. But let us know your guys' thoughts. We do have some comments about this. Rebel Sith 18 says, "Yo, what's up, guys? I listen to your streams with all the time. First time I thought I'd join live tonight." Well, thank you for joining us. Hopefully you join continuing in the future. All y'all notice the green magic cloud around Ventress in the top right of the Tails poster. Yes, so there is a specific magic. It doesn't so Ventress not specifically has the magic around her. She has a green light around her. It's kind of a neon-esque, Coruscant underworld light, but there are seemingly characters, Night Sisters or otherwise, in that green magic that you see so often from the Night Sister episodes of the Clone Wars. So it'll be exciting to see what happens there. I do think it does hint at us at least getting to see her resurrection now, and I'm excited to see that. Still not sold on bringing her back, but I'm excited to at least get those steps and start to see that coming into fruition.
Yeah, I mean, it is fairly interesting kinda seeing how it looks like. I mean, it looks like there's 2 people kinda walking with some fluorescent flame. It that is very close to, like, the green fire, the green, like, you know, yeah, fire imagery that is quite common with the Night Sister magic. I know we see Marin, and it's a little bit different there, but I think at least with all the Clone Wars Night Sisters, especially with Talzin, it is a little bit more fury in general, so I could see that. I do wonder if maybe you wanna do something where it's like Talzin is playing a role here, and I wouldn't mind that, especially since a huge point of Dark Disciple is, like, Ventress has Quinlan kill the sleeper, which is the only real source of the magic, the water of life there, and all these little tidbits and how it's like there's resurrection possible and all that, you can find that in a source book. You can't actually find that in the book itself, right? So, if this is a way to kind of keep that still solid, like, "Hey, the sleeper is gone," but, like, maybe there is something still transformative about Talzin. I mean, she still plays a role post-mortem in Son of Dathomir in season 6, of those episodes with Jar Jar of all people, right? Like, she
Hmm.
can still play a role. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, her lost daughter has some sort of special connection for her in that sense. I don't know if that's exactly how I'd like that to happen. I do think that making everything Tall's independent for me kind of makes comes like, it's limited. But if she has like a way to guide or a way to like or something special about Dathomir itself that she can guide towards, I think that'd be pretty interesting because at this point, once Ventress has the hair grown out again, she's not really trying to practice Night Sister stuff, right? When we see her in the Bad Batch, it's not like she's suddenly like Marin poofing and teleporting and doing stuff like that. She's still the Ventress that was trained by Dooku, that was trained in the Jedi arts, and fell, right? Now it just so happens to be that it's a little bit more morally gray. She's trying to just do what's right and necessary, but she's not like some pure good guy either. So I'd like to see something like that be a reflection of that. And if it is a revival for her character, if this is a new stage for her character, I'd like that to be very clearly shown, because that's not what the Bad Batch is indicating, and she's very much just the Ventress we know, and that
Yeah.
works if you're like, "Okay, she still had this transformative experience, it's just her another day in her life," right? So it's almost like you have to make her first return in years almost a smaller story, and you have to somehow take this typically shorter episode and make that more transformative for the character and justify why she's acting that way. It's a tough task, but
Mhm.
if that imagery on the poster is supposed to indicate something like that, or like spirits of the Dathomiri or whatever, or something that could then be sourced or mined for Ahsoka season 2 with the grandmothers and all that, sure, I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind the Great Mothers kinda having some sort of way of unlocking more primal energy, primal Night Sister connections and all that, and this is like a tease of that. Cool for me, but you gotta make it kinda big and visually huge, right? If that's what that poster is even trying to indicate. If it's
Right.
just like an Underworld thing, like, okay, it's like she's bathed in neon light, it's a bit misleading to me, but I can see where you come from, Rebel Sith. I am of that same viewpoint looking at it again. I just like, man, you gotta make that like a good 4 or 5 minutes at least of like a sequence for me in one of those episodes, if not the first episode with her.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I think it needs to be something that is is really, really specifically focused on, like you're saying, like it has to be important. It can't just be
Yeah,
something that just happens. Otherwise, it really does ruin, in my opinion, the ending of that book because it just is something that is so significant and it has been significant in Star Wars for a long time. I think the length as well is another big reason why I'm very sensitive to this topic is just because she was dead for so long. She was dead for 10 years. Like the Star Wars characters or just fictional characters in general don't stay dead that long if they are going to be resurrected, all of a sudden for no reason. Usually if a character is going to be resurrected for some, mid-tier story or just something that's not that significant to the character itself, you do it in a year or 2 years or right after the medium comes out, or there's some really obvious intentions in the story that like, yeah, this character's probably not dead, or a little end credit scene type thing, an epilogue in a book, something like that that just really solidifies, hey, this character's coming back. And even though there are those seeds laid in Dark Disciple, to not pick up on them for 10 years, it really just makes you feel like those seeds aren't really there, right? So, like, that's the big thing for me. But yeah, I think they're gonna talk about it. Could it end up being like I could see it end up being some type of thing like she has PTSD from almost like she's lying there in her ship while it's in hyperspace and it's on autopilot and she's asleep and she's having these flashbacks to when she was resurrected or different moments on Dathomir. And then she moves on from it and we just kind of never go back to it. I think that's the Tales of style of dealing with that. If they truly want to get into the story of Asajj Ventress, then maybe we'll actually see it. But just the Tales of style doesn't give me confidence that they're going to spend the entire first episode of her story on her resurrection. And that's where I get a little nervous. Could that come back in the future? If we do another show, could it come back and we get like the full scene as the cold open for season 1, episode 1 of her show? Absolutely. And they have plenty of time to change it and change my mind on it, but I want to see that in this show, and if we don't get it, it'll be a little disappointing, but I'm not expecting it, I guess is what I should say. And then Rebel Sith also says, I think we'll see Ventress rise from the dead on Dathomir in the first episode, then take the kid to find Voss at the end, and Cad Bane's story will lead up to his duel with Boba by the end. I think this Tales is a setup for a Clone Wars anthology style show set after the Bad Batch, one last Dark Times fill in for all the characters we have questions about at this time. Yeah, I've been calling for that for years. Since the Bad Batch made it pretty obvious that it wasn't going to be that show, it wasn't going to really tackle any of the other characters besides the Bad Batch themselves. I've been calling for that. I even made a video. I don't know if you're familiar with our channel or how long you've been a fan of ours, but I made a video a year ago, almost or more than a year ago, I think at this point, about that specific topic. And I would really love that to be the setup for this. I think one of the interesting things that would be involved in the marketing of that is the fact that this show is coming out a week or so after Celebration, where you would hypothetically think something like that might get revealed, especially if it does release it in the second half of this year. So if that type of show is revealed, maybe it does get more people to watch Tales of the Underworld who might not have if this is the next, Clone Wars. There's going to be a bigger install base for that than there would be these Tales of. On the flip side, do they just focus on marketing Tales of the Underworld instead of marketing their next animated project? Because now that we have a reveal for the next animated project, could they kind of just name drop it and it doesn't actually come out this year? And this is kind of our filler placeholder because one of the things I talked about in the reaction video the other day was we've been so convinced that Vision season 3 was coming out on May the 4th because season 2 came out on May the 4th and it was only weeks after Celebration. Now that this is confirmed for May the 4th, do we get both on May the 4th? Is Vision season 3 going to be a summer or late summer, early thing, Star Wars content and instead of what we thought would be 11 weeks long? So, what are their plans for that? I think it'll be really interesting building into Celebration specifically to see if they have more plans in store that are around Tales of the Underworld. I'm assuming they'll probably screen a couple episodes at Celebration, so we'll start to hear people's thoughts on the series there. But it could be a great marketing tool, especially if people really love this show, say, hey, yeah, not only is it Tales of the Underworld, another Tales series, which you guys really like, but it's building into a show we're starting here in October or November. So you guys get hyped for it because we are going to deliver on these characters, and both of them, Cad Bane, Ventress, they'll be making appearances here later in the show, as well as your favorites from the Bad Batch and all that type of stuff, Clone Wars. It would be really great if they at least talked about something like that, but we shall see. But I would love them to finally announce that Dark Time show. I think that's something they really, really should do.
Yeah, I've been on the same boat ever since Liam put that video out, and it still really does hold up with even all these new releases that, obviously we could have no real knowledge of or awareness of. It's like, it's cool that we're getting these tales of don't get us wrong, but those are slices. It shouldn't feel like, okay, these are important storytelling beats. Like, it should be like, yeah, man, that's a fun thing to get to see every year, right? I was like, oh, this follows up thematically on parts of the arc or like important period of their life where they're transforming and changing. It shouldn't be like, bam, that's it. That's everything that you need to know about this character, and we're not gonna ever touch them again. Or like, if we do, it might be in like a comic or something. It's like, well, no, I don't want that, right? I want something that feels substantial like the Clone Wars was. Rebels, it can get away with some smaller episodes and all that because at the end of the day, there's a nuclear core. There's a nuclear family of sorts in that center, with the Ghost Crew. Clone Wars worked because once we kinda got past George Lucas's strange choice of, like, having everything nonlinear and started going in order, we were still able to jump between these different stories and feel the scale of the galaxy, and for late 2000s, early 2010s, uh, the first real push in animation of that length for Lucasfilm, that was incredible, right? By season 3 and 4, it felt like, "Wow, you're telling huge, impactful stories." That's why, people love Revenge of the Sith. They might talk about the Stover novel, they might talk about Charles Soule's comics, all this and that, right? But I think a lot of people's improvement in reception to Revenge of the Sith comes because you feel the weight of the Clone Wars. You feel how that's changed people's perceptions and all that. And it's not just because we saw Anakin for 80 episodes. It's like, yeah, I also got to see all these different things that were kind of puzzle pieces pulling all around. Same thing should happen here with the Dark Times. It doesn't seem like we'll get too many more books. Well, there's space for games with Cal Kestis and all that, but he's also seemingly exiting or finishing his story by the end of the Dark Times, right? So let's just consolidate stuff and still show that transition, right? I mean, we've got Andor, don't get me wrong, but Andor is still like a show that feels very original trilogy coded, right? It has certain things like the CIS and all that, but we still haven't seen a show that's shown like the full transition. We've seen the transition from with Bad Batch of the Republic to that early Empire, But now let's show us, like, transitioning from the middle peak of the dark times into that proper original trilogy where it feels like everything looks 70s retro tech again. Hairstyles, characterizations, all that. The prequels have to be forced to change. Like, if we can see, like, characters that were so prequel defined visually and all that, change into something of, like, what they would look like in the original trilogy, that would do huge service to us, and you can still jump into characters with their origins. I know we've already seen, like, Wedge Antilles and Rebels, but, again, you could see Han Solo stuff that we haven't seen in Imperial Cadet comics, just a couple slices there, what his life was like during training from, like, the cutscenes of him actually using the flight simulators and all that. You could jump into the Pat story to start off more earlier on, but then later transition to stuff that's way more important, like, okay, how did they set up Yavin Base and stuff like that, like, that's kinda how a Dark Time show should be, that's how big it should be, and that's frankly something I hope happens, because Bad Batch never really went to that big leap as Rebels did and Clone Wars did. If you can reshape people's thinkings of like, okay, all these tales of, and then the slightly bigger show in Bad Batch are like a nice little bridge to this final piece. Cool. Then everyone feels like I've spent a lot of time investing in those, and now it feels like I'm way more prepared than the average person just jumping straight into that. They'll still be able to have their own relationship to these characters, their stories, and how it's being presented there in this bigger show with these different arcs. But if you watch all this other stuff, you're like, oh wow, that really does inform a lot of things. Oh, there's the characters I haven't seen in a couple of years. That's the best way to do it. Is it gonna happen? I don't know, right? That's like Liam said, Vision's no longer being that May 4th release. Are they saving it for all the way into that back last quarter? I don't know. I hope not, honestly, because I don't know if that's enough to carry, like, a holiday season for me. I'd love to have, like, an animated show start that way, and if they can't do it in the same way like they did with Clone Wars, where they put out, like, a full season with different arcs, if they can only do, like, here's an arc every couple of months, I'd be cool with that too, as long as it's still under that umbrella. One thing I really do not like about Disney Star Wars recently, especially, is just the naming schemes. It just doesn't really work for stuff. The Bad Batch ultimately did work, but then they pulled back on, the same mistake that they would have made with Ahsoka, uh, the Mandalorian and the book of, Boba Fett, right? It suddenly is like, okay, there's all these big things that we're potentially talking about, like Clone Rebellion, all this and that, and then they shrunk it back down to like, let's just talk about the Bad Batch. So that works, but otherwise, that name would have been another case of like, okay, well, that's like a group that's involved, but there's a whole bigger storyline, bigger world to explore. So it doesn't really feel like you're talking about them anymore. So I hope this is just a sign of them like understanding if you're gonna go for a big show, have a broader title. It really does help. If you wanna have narrow focuses, Tales of makes sense, but this other stuff, let's make a little bit better naming schemes here. It is really kind of pushing people away from a lot of these shows that do have great stories and great episodes, but don't necessarily feel like, "Oh, I'm watching a show about Ahsoka. I'm watching a show about Boba," right? Like, you
Right.
fix that with animation, just parlay that into what's happening in live action, and suddenly you'll have people just by name alone maybe get a little bit more interested than they have been the last couple of years, which because 'cause they've already been kind of burned in that very specific way too.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a great point. And it's one we don't really think about as often, but I mean, they've gone for the safest possible route on almost every naming name for these shows and just naming them after whoever the central character is. But I think there's a little more mystique sometimes when you name something Tales of the Underworld or when you name something different, something that involves the era, something that involves the story, not necessarily, or just give a subtitle to them, Ahsoka, The
Yeah.
Rise of Thrawn, or something like that. Like anything like that could really help out your show, especially if they're mini series. There's no reason not to do that type of thing. I mean, we always thought it was a dumb idea to name the Obi-Wan show Obi-Wan Kenobi instead of just Kenobi. It rolls off the tongue better. It's the name of the book, all that. But they have refused to kinda do that. Maybe they'll change their direction as they continue to push forward here and try different things and grow their audience, but yeah, definitely, that's a good point as well. I think we need to move on to the next topic here because 'cause we've gone for about 45 minutes almost on Tales of the Underworld, and it is our big topic of the week, so, never a problem going with the main topic, but we'll get back to the rest of your guys' comments around Tales of the Underworld here in a little bit because I do want to bring up a couple of these other stories, especially this one because it's a follow up from last week and it's something you guys were excited about last week, and I'm very excited about it. It's the special deluxe edition of Revenge of the Sith, Episode Three's novelization, the iconic Episode 3 novelization, really the only novelization you really hear about, at least with Star Wars. People clamoring for more from its author, just praising it left and right. It truly could be the greatest Star Wars book of all time. It's one of my favorites. And it just is an iconic piece of Star Wars. So many people herald it as one of the best Star Wars things ever made. Well, it is getting its deluxe edition as was leaked last week on October 14th. And this week we got some more details about what that entails. We speculated about it last week because it's $60, which is double the price of a new hardcover. And let's be honest, most places don't charge $30 for hardcovers. Even if you go to a bookstore, most places have them like, Target's got 10% off books or so almost every time you buy a new book, or Barnes and Noble has discounts. Almost everywhere has discounts. Buy them on Amazon, they're usually like half price or a third of the price off. Well, this one is going to be very expensive, but there's a reason because they released a little bit of a video yesterday, a little preview, 40-second clip on social media detailing the book, and it looks beautiful. It has sprayed pages. The sprayed pages are red, and the sides say, "This is how it feels to be Anakin Skywalker forever." Dot dot dot. It's got a new cover that we haven't seen before. The silhouette of Darth Vader, and in the middle, some concept art of the fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin on Mustafar, with the Vader silhouette filled up by the lava and the mountains and the volcanoes in the background of Mustafar. It looks really great. But the big feature is why you're paying $60 for this is it will come with over 150 annotations by author Matthew Stover, which I think is really cool. I mean, just the fact that they are bringing Stover back here. It's not just hey, we own the rights to this thing and people like it. Let's re-release it and just sell it for, more money because we can. This is something that's heavily involved with the author, which, I mean, if you guys are familiar with Star Wars books, this doesn't really happen. The only author I can remember this happening for is Timothy Zahn. So just the fact that Stover is being put in that conversation, it's really, really cool. I know the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy all got these kind of deluxe editions as well with, I don't think they had annotations, if I remember correctly. Those are something that surprisingly I don't own, but they have slip covers and they had alternate art, but I don't think they had annotations. So this is really, really cool. And it would be from what I can recount, the first time we've really gotten something like this from Star Wars. And hopefully it leads to more. As book collectors, this stuff is really, really cool. It also comes with an acetate jacket with foil stamping, a paper over board case, which is really nice if you're going to be displaying this or putting it on a shelf. It protects the book, protects the sprayed pages. So that's really cool. Gilded and stained edges and illustrated full color end papers, as well as I think this is kind of a goofy one to advertise, but a red satin ribbon bookmark that's included. It's like, whoa, a bookmark. It's in the book. But yeah, it's coming with a bookmark. All, nice versions of books do. But this looks beautiful. I'm really glad we're learning more about this because I figured it would be something pretty cool for $60, but they kind of went over what I was expecting with this. I was expecting, okay, maybe an alternate cover, maybe a slipcase like they're giving it, maybe in some new art, maybe a few illustrations, or they're bringing concept art, which I think is really cool. It's not just stills from the movie. Concept art is really nice, but the annotations are the thing. Like, you get to see Stover's process. Hopefully they kind of give us a little bit of insight on some of the things he discussed with Lucas himself, some of the things that we got relating to the original shooting script versus what came out on film, because these are all based on the shooting scripts of the movie, not necessarily the final product, because most of the time these novelizations came out prior to the movie, or at least the same day. Whereas with the sequels and a lot of the Disney stuff, in order to avoid spoilers, they released them weeks, if not a month, after each movie came out. The prequels all released either before or on the same day as the movie. So it's a pretty different process. So it's interesting kind of seeing what came out of the Legends novelizations, as they were all based on shooting scripts, and as Lucas has said a million times, he's very notorious for fixing his movies in the edit room. So I think this is really awesome, Sonic. When you watched this video, when you heard about what's involved with the deluxe special edition of Revenge of the Sith, what were your thoughts?
Kinda makes me wanna be a collector because for $60, this is really packed with a lot. This is more than, like, a lot of the Goldsboro books and all that, which are more expensive, have shipping issues at times and all that, so really really cool stuff, don't get me wrong. If people are on Twitter or I think they're also on Blue Sky, but, uh, Darth Internus, which is, like I don't know if it's an intern or, like, someone who works at Random House Worlds, gave a little bit more details. There's gonna be, like, a belly band that has, like, the, serial barcode and everything that's, required on these books, so that way it doesn't actually be on the acetone cover, it's not on the book itself. It lets it be pristine art, which is awesome, right? 170 plus annotations. Apparently, that little satin red, marker took so long to, like, get fully adjusted and made for this book too, so I'm hoping that indicates maybe there's some design or something to it, something that kinda makes it stick out, but yeah, I mean, for 60, hard to really hate it, right? I don't love text personally on edges. I like colored edges, but I don't know if I love text. It's I always forget how sometimes edgy that line comes, "This is what it's like to be Anakin Skywalker forever," right? Like, I think it hit absolutely hard in 2005. I'm sure when I first read that line when I was, like, a couple years later reading the book, I was like, "Oh my god, that's insane statement," right? And it still carries weight, but I don't know if it's something I personally love on the edge, but seeing it again and again, I think it's working for me. I think it's because that forever is kinda on its own line. It kinda is just, like, printed in the book, and I think that was a smart choice that they got the spacing there right. But yeah, I'm excited. The fact that he's coming back to do this, I don't assume that he made these annotations and, like, they're like, "Oh, 20 years ago, I kept the notes for every single thing there." I'm sure that Lucasfilm was very good at collecting stuff like that, but this is kinda more in his toolbox, in his sandbox. It's not necessarily something that they would, like, demand to have with them, right? So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hope some of it's new. I hope some of it's from 2005. I hope there's some things that, like, differentiate his thoughts from then and now too, if there are cases like that. But this is exciting. I'd like to see Zahn do something like this for Heir to the Empire. Like, there's always cool covers coming out for that, but nothing like this pristine, and that could be something that's really cool with the eventual Heir to the Empire-esque, New Republic film that's gonna happen at the end of the Manaverse. So that it's really cool. I just feel like it's an obvious tie-in with the 20th anniversary of Revenge of the Sith coming out, right? With all the movie tickets, a big hoopla around it, right? 40X and people in our generation especially being like, "Wow, it's reached probably peak mass and, like, how people are, like, responding to the film now." It's gonna do money. It's gonna do money. I know we've been talking about, like, Minecraft, saving the box office this year. This will do numbers compared to even, like, a lot of these, like, re-releases. I think this one's gonna be pretty big, and this is a year that has Jaws 45th is coming out too. A couple of oh, no, 50th actually is coming out,
50th.
right? There's a lot coming out, right? So yeah, I think this is gonna be probably the biggest re-release of the year. It's gonna make, The Lord of the Rings and, Avatar and all that look pretty small with just how much of the reputation they earned, infamous or, happily. But, yeah, I'm excited, and I think this is gonna be only something that makes that experience even better, so I don't know if I will personally pick this up, but if I find one in the wild, like, at, like, Barnes& and Noble or something, I'm probably gonna, like, flip through it just to see the annotations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be a hard one for me not to pick up. I think I'll end up getting it at some point. But this is yeah, it's beautiful and it's awesome, and I'm really glad we're getting more details about it because it looks really great. Saint says, "I'd love to see Stover write a canon novel." Yeah, that would be a dream. I don't know why more Legends authors haven't come back to do canon. I don't know if that's a mandate thing from Lucasfilm Publishing just to kind of get new voices in there or just to create different tone, different vibe, different feel, different look to canon. But some of these people that they used to have who were Star Wars encyclopedias, like James Luceno, who wrote two canon books, John Jackson Miller finally came back. Timothy Zahn has written six books in canon, that people forget about. That's almost as many as he wrote in Legends, but he hasn't written one since 2021, I believe. So it is these Legends authors that have either contributed or used to contribute all the time. They're people you should pick their brains. And we did see last year with John Jackson Miller and Stephen Barnes returning, who were both Legends veterans, returning last year to write Star Wars books. One was fairly well received, the Mace Windu book from Stephen Barnes, not as much so, but still, I'm glad they went with those authors and tried to bring some old style back to Star Wars and give it some of that flair. And maybe this is a tease at a possible future for Matthew Stover. But that would be really, really cool. But yeah, that's gonna do. I think I'll save the Andor stuff for a little bit if we get through a lot of these questions. But since the questions are starting to pile up and we've almost reached an hour into our stream, let's get into the chat. And we're gonna start with the super chat from Toydarian Dan, who said, "Do you think the big news at Star Wars Celebration will be Kathleen Kennedy announcing her retirement?" It's a good question in regards to Star Wars Celebration because we haven't talked about her retirement here in about a month or so, but it's going to be a topic I'm sure she'll address. Now, whether she'll wave it away in terms of just saying, like, hey, I'm still here and I'm still really excited to lead Star Wars into this new direction. We've got so many great things going, and just rest assured I'll be here for, a little bit longer as we continue to search for my successor. I think it'll be something like that. I don't in regards to your question, I don't see the big news being that she's retiring. And I don't think they would want that to be the big news at Star Wars. Like, a Star Wars convention, their goal is to sell the product of Star Wars, not necessarily talk about the business of Disney. So I don't think that's going to be something that they're really looking to make a big focus. But I would be shocked if it's not at least addressed by her because she is going to be leading some of the announcements that they're going to be making, and she's, I'm assuming, going to be there. So if she's there, I'm sure it's going to be brought up in a canned way of like she knows exactly what question she's going to get. She's going to answer it, and she's going to say a lot of studio speak on, yeah, I'm sure I really wish I could, I'm working really hard and our team's working really hard and I won't be here forever, but when I do leave, I'm certain we'll have a great replacement and somebody who's going to continue to carry on the legacy that we've set up here at Lucasfilm, something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm of the mostly same thought. Like again, celebration is supposed to be a celebration, right? Like you're not gonna take this opportunity to like show off all this new incredible Star Wars, the future of Star Wars, celebrating what has come before the anniversaries of Revenge of the Sith, and obviously with the 10-year anniversary of The Force Awakens, to then just be like, oh yeah, I'm leaving. Like that doesn't really work for a lot of people, right? I think it's gonna be weird if she was given, like, a chunk of the panel to talk about. I wouldn't be surprised if there's, like, career retrospectives for, like, long-time Lucasfilm employees, kinda like what their arc has been like. I wonder if there's gonna be a Light and Magic sort of mini panel because we know season 2 is gonna come out at some point, and in 22, it was, like, a big panel for that first season. Now it's like, okay, what exactly is that gonna mean? I don't know if it's gonna be anything like that, but yeah, like Liam said, maybe she'll give some sort of answer, but the only people who celebrate are the people looking for her to be like, "Finally, she's gone," right? Like, that's not a celebration. If you can say if anything, I think it's gonna be more complicated than what's been reported because, Hollywood Reporter said one thing, and then we heard from Collider another thing. Like, everyone's kinda got slightly different information, which usually for the trades who are so spot on about stuff, that is a bit weird. So, I don't know how much clarification she really wants to or needs to give there, but I wouldn't be surprised if she says, like, "Eventually, I'm gonna only be working on specific projects as, like, a producer," like, the first major one post, like, New Jedi Order, maybe that's when I'm gonna start taking a step back, but I don't think she'll commit to anything. I don't even if there is like a, "Oh, by the end of this year, she's gone," I think it's gonna be more like, "This is what's gonna be my last big hurrah, the one I wanna set it on top for the 50th, and then after that, I'll be a little bit more selective." I'll be like kinda how Lucas and Spielberg have been, right? Where they work behind the scenes for, like, Indiana Jones still, but they're not really, you know, front facing, they're not really the face of the company in the same way as they were, when they were prime. filmmakers and fully active and entrenched into their franchises, right? I think that's kind of the same boat she's gonna do. And with how important, consequential she has been for so much of blockbuster filmmaking, I think it only makes sense for her to do some very similar, like, quiet step back, you know? There wasn't really a big, like, "Oh, George Lucas and Spielberg aren't returning, like, let's make a big video announcement about that for Indiana Jones 5." It was more like, that's just how it happened. Maybe they gave a couple comments in interviews, and that's it. So, I think that's something that once it comes around and more definitively, when more stuff finally comes back into the trades, maybe she'll be more inclined to address it and be very specific. At Celebration, it's gonna be more like, "Yeah, no, I'm gonna move to, like, specific projects, you know, I'm not gonna really say much about my future, but, I'm winding down my career. It's been an incredible experience, I'm so thankful for what I've been able to do with Star Wars, with a lot of the franchises that Lucas and Spielberg had a huge role in, and I think it's now time to, like, set the stage for the next person. That's it. They won't have to say anything about the timeline. She won't have to say anything about who is gonna be that. That should all be stuff that's handled as a company, internally, as Lucasfilm has always done. It is like a very family-centered company. It's not really like, "Oh, now that it's under Disney, all the doors are open." It still operates fairly quietly about things happening, and then when it happens, it's like, "Oh, it just did," right? This is very out of the picture for us to have known that there is possibly an exit point now for Kathleen. That hasn't really happened for any other sort of announcements and big shifts that have happened with Lucasfilm in the last 13, 14 years, so, I would say expect maybe a comment or 2, but it's only gonna be people who are looking to, like, say, "Ah, she's finally gone," who'll make a huge deal of it when it's gonna be probably the most generic thing that she can say.
Yeah, I expect a canned response. I think the only way they make it like a big deal is if she was actually like if the rumors were correct and she was like actually retiring in May or something, and they
Yeah.
have the next person lined up. Then they would try to make a big deal about it to hype people up for the future, not
Yeah.
necessarily a, "Oh, I'm leaving, everybody get excited." It's a, like, "This is who's taking charge," like, "Oh, Dave Filoni's here to take charge," or "Jon Favreau's here to take charge," or "George Lucas is coming back." Like, if they were doing something like that, if they had a major name, then they would push that, right? But if it's just some business person that nobody really is aware of or some studio person, then it's probably going to be something that's done quietly. You'll hear about it from a Disney investor call. You'll hear about it from a press release Disney releases, but it won't be at one of these big conventions. I think honestly, the only convention that you would hear about something like that is the one we just had last week, which is CinemaCon, because that's more about the business side of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
industry, less about the films and the shows. These are about getting fans ready to spend their money, and I think that's something that they're going to focus on. But thank you for the question in the super chat. Scrolling back up to the top, and again, for those of you who are just joining us, we are going to be going for about another hour here, so we're going to run down through the stream. It is first come, first serve. But if you'd like to make sure you get a chat on tonight, send in a super chat. It supports our channel, and you get bumped up to the top. We'll answer your questions first. If you want other ways to send in super chats or super chat esque chats, if you join our YouTube memberships or our Patreon at the Rebel tier or higher, you will get a chance to send in priority chats. If you're on Patreon, you can comment on the specific post on Patreon about this stream. Comment your questions there, and I will directly address them on the show. If you're on memberships, you get the option, the ability to send a specific type of chat. So make sure you look at those as well. We have plenty to offer on those programs. All right, so back up to the top here. We went with Rebel Sith earlier because it was their comment was about the Underworld. So we're going to start here with Batterside the Manslayer. Hey guys, good to see you. Besides Tales of the Underworld, what else do you think it will be announced at Celebration and Animation? Any chance of following the main characters in a big story post Return of the Jedi? That's been the question for a while, and I know I did see your comment, Batterside. I'm still going through the comments on that video that was posted yesterday. In agreement with you on like the hope that an animation show is where they go with these characters, because let's be real, like, that would be the ideal way to keep the version of these characters physically and visually that we all know and recognize, as well as to keep their stories exciting and involved. But the only way I see that happening is if they decide to make animation a significant portion of the Mandalorian and Thrawn story, because like I said last week or weeks ago, like I said in the video that we just posted, the clip out from our live, the main problem with the animation is not necessarily doing it in an animated form. It's the fact that these characters have to be a part of the big stories. So if Thrawn is invading and the Imperial Remnant is coming back and they're doing significant damage to the New Republic and they're taking over, it doesn't make any sense for Han, Luke, and Leia to not be involved. So unless you're going to tell their half of the story in animation and you're going to give significant arcs to Thrawn and some of these other characters in animation, and then they show up as CGI versions of themselves in a couple of scenes in live action, that's there's no other way to make them, to leave them out of the conflict. It hurts their character arcs. It makes no sense for the universe. It doesn't work. So I would love an animated show following the three of them. Now, when it takes place, like I'm saying, is the big problem. We have Mandalorian, which starts this whole Thrawn conflict, starting 5 years after Return of the Jedi, so in 9 ABY. We know that the new comic is starting about five-ish ABY, because Battle of Jakku is 5 ABY. So the new comic series that's starring the main characters is starting shortly after Battle of Jakku. So that's going to try to cover that 4 year gap between Battle of Jakku and The Mandalorian. So where does this animated show take place? Does it cover similar ground as the comic? Does it take place after the Thrawn conflict? Well, if it takes place after the Thrawn conflict, then I don't think there's any chance you hear a show around these characters anytime soon, because they're going to really build up the Thrawn conflict. But then if it's after the Thrawn conflict, how many other conflicts are there for these characters between Thrawn conflict and The Force Awakens that really matter? So does that mean it's just a show focused on Luke's Jedi Order? Is it a show that's focused on the building and the image of the New Republic Senate around Leia, or whatever Han's deciding to do? There's a lot of things up in the air. So I guess to make long story short, no, I don't see really any chance for that specific show to get announced this celebration. Is it a possibility in the future? Yes, but my big problem with it, if they did announce it for this celebration, would be the fact that they can't leave these characters out of the Thrawn plot, because it just kind of diminishes their importance in the overall Star Wars universe if Ezra and Hera and Ahsoka are the ones defending the galaxy from its biggest threat in 5 years, and Luke, Han, and Leia are like, yeah, we'll stand around and watch.
Yeah, I think animation can work for everything leading up to the Mandoverse, and it could, like I said, there are certain mediums that make sense to cross over. Like to this day, I don't understand why we don't really see more of the animated properties. I know they have longer timelines than comics do. Comics are almost like responsive to feedback, responsive to comic readers with single issues sometimes. It's really just arc to arc that can things can change, and, like, obviously, if things are changing in the industry versus animation, it's like, "I've created these assets 3 years ago." Like, you're just seeing them now, right? I know they've got very different timelines, but you can still make them very individual stories, just like how we're saying how the tales of can still fit in with like something like a Dooku Lost, where it's like, okay, that's a huge, large period of his life covered, big chunks of his story, and then here's some slices that kind of reflect some of those stories that we're told that we already have a general indication of where he was going, right? Oh, and here's something really important that happened, but it's not like, oh, suddenly like it bypasses. It's just like this is now the most main important thing. No, right? So I think you can do the same thing here. Do some sort of animated show that's like some really cool things with them, just like comics, and they can both be fairly equal and feel like okay, like I can read either or, and I'll still get a lot out of it. I don't expect it to happen, and if it does happen, it would kinda have to be, like, something that's personal of a conflict almost, without being personal in the same way like Ben Solo's tragedy and everything is. So it's like, okay, what sort of villain would fit that role, right? This is not like the Bantamere where they have, like, a Corellian trilogy lined up. I don't think that's gonna line people up to watch an animated show like that. It has to be big. And in that case, right, like, how does that make sense to make it big when you've got the metaverse, like, 2, 3 years after whatever period they cover? It's like, okay, that's a cool thing to do, but that's really about it. So, yeah, I would find that fairly weird myself. I don't know if that's something I wanna see happen, honestly, but yeah, that's how I would look at it. But yeah, I don't know. It's a weird question for me too because there's been some weird Marvel recently, like, they've had the Punisher special kinda be informally announced. We know with, uh, success, obviously, of, like, Daredevil Born Again, Bernthal came back because they really revamped it, made sure it was connected to everything that we saw, in the original Netflix shows. Almost feels like it's one-to-one connected even if they aren't referencing a lot of that stuff directly. And now he's like, "Yeah, I'm doing a Punisher special. That's really cool for me. It's gonna be edgy, it's cool. 40, 50 minutes. We're gonna heighten it up even more than what we see of him in Daredevil and his Netflix show." That's cool. Now, is that saying now after, like, a year or 2 of them saying, "Ah, we're kinda done in general with Disney with these special presentations," are they now gonna be like, "Well, actually, they still were useful, right? This is things that we should invest for stories we wanna tell but don't necessarily have enough time or space to do so." Why not do that with, like, a Lucan and Leia one? Make one special for each, set it in the Metaverse, or make just one big special that's a little longer, like, maybe, like, a 60, 70-minute episode. Put that up there, now you're caught up with everything that you need to know about them from the Mandoverse, right? And it doesn't have to be tied into everything the Mandalorian's doing, or Ahsoka's doing, or Boba Fett is doing, just what they're doing at that time before as they're approaching the conflict. It's a good testing run to see if these new recasts will work, right? I mean, I think once they do a recast, if they do it there, they're committed, but if you wanna still do deepfake, do one big episode. If you wanna do add a recast afterwards, great. If you wanna test it out there, also great, and lets you kinda, like, play around with lower stakes before they're, the bigger players in the conflict alongside an Ezra and Ahsoka, Din Djarin, and Grogu, and all that. So that's how I would like to see something happen. I get the point about animation, don't get me wrong, but I think no matter what, even if everything in canon is supposedly on the same level, it's just not. It's just not. So whatever animation has to happen, it should be cool character-focused stuff that builds them up, that leads them to where they're going, by the time of the sequels, but isn't concluded there. And is that really appealing at this current moment as, Star Wars is trying to, like, get us through all the way through the Mandoverse and finish that period off and start new, start afresh? No, no, I think that's something for a new regime more than something right now, and animation would not be the way to do it.
Yeah, I agree, and I just think I think animation can work. They just have to give the credence to it. They just have to be willing to accept it and bring it a part of the big story, and they're just not gonna do that. They're not gonna put an animated movie in theaters around Luke, Leia, and Han. They're not gonna let Mandalorian have the majority of his story done in animation, right? So, like, that's just the big problem, is when we get that final movie, if it is indeed Heir to the Empire from Dave Filoni, if Luke, Han, and Leia don't show up, it's a mistake. So, will we get an animated series about the three of them? I think it's strongly possible one day. Is it going to be around this conflict? I don't think so. I think it'll be something different. Next, Battleside the Manslayer says, by the way, seeing that planet on the poster of Andor Season 2 makes me really want it to be Dantooine. Looks the same as it did in Clone Wars '03, where Master Windu fights. Yeah, I mean, that's been a theory for a while. I just the main reason I'd want that is just to have somebody who, like, lived through that and was like, "Yeah, like, I remember the Jedi. There was this one Jedi who punched a bunch of super battle droids, and it was awesome." And it's like
Yeah,
the kid
yeah.
from that episode
Oh, yeah.
grown up,
Uh,
and he's now a rebel. That would be the reason I would want that, but I think it's a strong possibility, distinct possibility. Obviously, we talked about how connected Andor has been to the larger Star Wars lore, how well it's used different lines from the movies or shows in the past to create plot lines that are significant in the show itself. The fact that Dantooine is one of the planets that had a rebel base on it at once, is involved in A New Hope, it makes it distinctly a possibility that it is a location in Andor.
yeah. Yeah, that's been one of my personal favorite theories. Um if you don't even address that, like, I know it's kind of a throwaway line, but again, Gilroy for some reason has been super good about respecting everything in canon and everything. So I would be shocked if he doesn't feel like, okay, we're approaching this final arc. It's the final week of the episodes. It should feature now, right? Like, okay, cool. And I think why I'm so like, like it would make sense is like seeing Brasso, seeing Bix. Yeah, it looks like maybe it could just be the Ferrix like miners and all that just like moved off world. It could just be like another part of Ferrix, a biome that we haven't seen, right? Uh, that's another thing that's been fairly good about Andor. They haven't made planets just one single biome, right? Like classic Star Wars is. They haven't been as extreme as the prequels either, where it's like, okay, let's get crazy alien with the different fauna and climate changes and everything like that. No, they haven't done that either, obviously, because it's a very practical and grounded show. But they have shown like, different planets can have different landscapes, different buildings, everything, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if it's Ferrix. I wouldn't be surprised, like Liam said, it could be Gorman, right? Like everything's leading to Gorman, just different groups leading into Gorman. But I would like that line to be justified. It's a great way to continue building off, especially early Andor, where there are connections to the prequel still, right? Like, we see Cassian's backstory, we see the CIS ship and all that, we see the clone troopers once they're stripped of their markings and all that. I wanna see more stuff like that happen. So, if Dan Dantooine can get both, a nice little connection and nod to A New Hope that it didn't really get in Rogue One, right? Cool, right? That's another way for this uh, uh, this original movie of Rogue One to continue building connections just so happens to be what its semi-sequel, semi-prequel show, right? I'd love to see that, and then if you're like, "Oh," like Liam said, like, "I was the kid who got that water bottle from Mace Windu after I saw him, like, punch through a bunch of B2 droids." He doesn't even have to, like I mean, I'd love for some guy to just say that, like, "Oh, man," like, and everyone just look at him like, "What?" Right? What do you like, that's doesn't make sense, right? Like, that's why the Jedi are myth. That's something I wouldn't mind. I really wouldn't mind that, so, um, if it's gonna happen, cool. It's already been kinda canonized anyways with Brotherhood to me, right? Like, there's a huge blurb at the beginning of those books that canonizes, like, the first few minutes, basically, of the O3 show, or the first few episodes. We've already gotten enough for that Dantooine scene to be canon for me, but if that somehow made that leap to canon, I'd love that.
Batusai then says, "What Star Wars board games have you guys played or you have in your collection? I have Rebellion, Clone Wars, but some are hard to find in Spanish. I have no problem with the English alone." Yeah, that is, I guess, the main game. To be honest, into tabletop games, I just really have never played any of them. I would love to. So I might actually do other ones that expensive, and I just don't have. I guess I don't have the space to store. First of all, and the resources to spend on big Star Wars board games that I can't play with anyone like you, Metasai. It's nice to be able to play it with somebody. But I had a bunch of the old, like, kids board games. Like I had like Star Wars Monopoly, Star Wars Life. There were some cool Attack of the Clones games that were around when I was younger. There's one around the Geonosis battle, which I still have, and I forgot what that's called. It's been 20 years since I played it, probably. That was cool. I had a Star Wars chessboard. I had Star Wars Checkers. I had Star Wars Clue. I had, all those. So that's kind of it for me. But I've never experienced a Star Wars tabletop game. I think the most recent Star Wars game I played was the Villainous game series that Disney did, which was a pretty cool game series. And I played the Star Wars version. That's the latest Star Wars game I played.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand, like, when we were really getting into it, and I don't know what your age is or anything like that, but, prequel kids were at that time period where board games had, like, seemingly fallen off forever, right? Then, like, in that mid to late 2010s, started kinda getting revitalized, and then, obviously, I know there's, like, 90 Star Wars fans who have all the old RPG books that are like, "Come on, guys, this has always been around." Yeah, it was, but there's that weird period right as the prequels were happening where you didn't really like, there were things happening, but it wasn't the same, right? It really picked up again once Disney took over with the licensing. board games and D&D and everything had to really kick into gear again. Like, you have to understand, dude, like, I've played enough D&D to also know that, like, stuff like Pathfinder and D&D in the early 2000s when their updates and all that, they weren't well below it. They were like, "Oh, people don't like that, change the rules, it doesn't make sense." Pathfinder is literally born out of people being like, "Go back to the old version of Dungeons& and Dragons, we do not like Dungeons& and Dragons 4." Right? It just didn't work for a lot of people. So, uh, there was that weird period of time where even the people invested in these sort of board games did not like them. So, I don't really know how the scene was like for, specifically the Star Wars tabletop games, but I know in general, the scene had this weird period of like, well, video games are still the priority. There's so many coming out in the late '90s, early 2000s, and then what's actually happening with the big tabletops, like the big franchise tabletop games was like, it's a bit of a rocky period compared to now. Now it's like there's board game cafes and everything just spawning every town that you see. For a
Mhm.
while, that was like a foreign concept to me. So, yeah, me and Liam have talked about like getting into one of those, running a campaign on the channel. I know some people
Yeah.
have already started kicking off that. I think Eckhart's Ladder has been doing one recently. Which has been really cool to see, like, other, channels kinda jump into them with their understanding of lore and combining old RPG manuals with new ones and all that, and that's something I'd love to do, but like Liam said, it's a lot of time, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of investment. Even if you download everything online, to have someone run the game, to craft the story, even if you're letting the players dictate so much more of the story, to then be able to flesh out the story in a way that not like even Dungeon Dragons really doesn't push, so much about Star Wars is about the details. It's not just enriching, it's like fanatics care about every little thing. They're like, "Oh, I see that little World War II prop that's used on Bosk that's, in an old Doctor Who episode from the '60s." Like, most people don't know that, but Star Wars fans would know something like that, right? It's what enlivens, it's what enriches the show, it enriches the shows, the movies, animation, everything, right? So, if you come to a game, you'd have to be able to, like, explain things that are from both canon and legends that you're bringing in to, like, make this as rich as much of a super fan thing. That's how I'd wanna play it, like, I'd wanna be able to say, like, you know, uh, ULAVs from, like, Raid Squadron, like, when they're talked about there. That's not something that's in canon, but there's so much military tech in those books, so many in those RPG books from back then, and then combine that with some of the stuff that's in the more recent handbooks. That takes a lot of time and effort to, sync up and make sense. Even if should theoretically be easy, it's still a lot of work. So, if you guys really wanna see us do that, eventually just keep pestering us. We'll get into it. Hopefully, we can do it by ourselves, but maybe you guys know somebody or you're experienced with tabletop games and wanna help us out with that. We'd love to be able to craft some cool campaigns with just the amount of lore that's just rattling around our brains that, it's great on this channel, but otherwise it's pretty useless.
Yeah, I would love that. I would love to try it. I just have never had the people to play it with. So maybe our fans here are the people to play it with. But yeah, I would love that. It'd be so much fun. Batsai also says you should totally play the online version of Pokemon Master Trainer. It's a blast and it's only $2 on Stimeo. I'll have to check it out. I looked up Master Trainer because I was like, that sounds familiar. And I was like, oh, I had this board game when I was a kid. I had the one that was from Hoenn, the Hoenn extension. But yeah, God, I completely forgot that was a huge nostalgia trip seeing that box on on Google Images. Rebel Sith, or no, we answered that one already. And then it's Battlesai again says if they decide to release all the unproduced arcs from the Clone Wars, what's the date in which they would most likely do it? There are many interesting ones. Padme working against Palpatine, Ahsoka below the Jedi Temple, Boba versus Bane, etc. The Bad Batch on Kashyyyk. I don't know. I think it would be something that would be interesting to make available again because they've made them, very hard to find. They're not readily available, which, is a disappointment because the point of releasing them in the first place was to be like, hey, we're never going to finish these, but if you guys want to see these stories or experience these stories in their rough form, here they are. It made sense to kind of take down maybe Dark Disciple because they sold that as a book and, might con- conflict with their sales of the book. But I think at this point, the book's 10 years old. You can release it again. Uh, but I don't know. I think I wouldn't put anything past them in terms of Clone Wars animation, as we've talked about a million times. Clone Wars animation is something they have perfected. It took it took Lucasfilm originally when it was under George Lucas a good 3, 4, 5 years to make it look really nice and clean. But they've just taken it under Disney, they've taken it to a whole nother level, and every time we see it, it's even better, whether it's Tales of the Underworld looking better than Tales of the Empire did, which looked better than Bad Batch did, which looked better than, Clone Wars Season 7 did. So they just keep making it better and better every time. So anything that has a basis in Clone Wars animation and anything that's under the label of Clone Wars, it's such a popular thing. I would never put it past them to not release Tales of the Clone Wars or something like that, across 3 or 4 parts, and it's each arc, and they release 2 a year across a couple of years. I wouldn't put them it past them to do that on Disney Plus, but it is something they should at least make readily available again to the rest of the public because, why keep those stories guarded if you're never going to do anything with them? It should be something that should be easily accessible for everybody like it used to be. So, I'm with you, and as for a timetable, I don't know. It's hard to say because it's not something that has been in any Star Wars conversation. They could do it this year. Is it likely? Probably not. I think more the more and more we see it, if it is the basis for whatever their next show is, the more and more likely it is just randomly announced that they're doing this. Guys, that would ever happen.
Yeah, it's a weird one for me because at the end of the day, we know some of it's already sort of been adapted, right? We know that the Kashyyyk Bad Batch arc would have shown Echo in some interesting different gear and all of that. That was a little bit more of like an ARC Trooper style, kind of like show him leading more in that direction, which I think would have worked really well for like once he does slip back into like more comfort with the Bad Batch, fitting in with them, and then when he leaves again, obviously, that idea was abandoned. It doesn't seem like that's something that'll be properly adapted, and they already got Gunji on Kashyyyk. They've already kinda done, like, the big spider monkeys and all that. It's like, "Okay, cool, that happened." It doesn't seem like an arc anymore. It seems like they just consolidated whatever they wanted to say, added some stuff that made more sense for post at Order 66, and then did an episode there. So, I don't think we see arcs like that, even though it does seem like there's a good amount of animatics for that. Um, uh, they need to release Crystal Crisis. If they're not gonna release it, at least release some version of the fireplace scene where Obi-Wan and Anakin are talking about, like, "Master, what would you do if I did something like this?" Like, how the Order treated Ahsoka and, like, "I disappointed." "Oh, you never could disappoint me," right? Like, that's such a huge thing. That's especially like I was saying before, we don't really get a lot about either of those characters in season 6 and season 7 of the Clone Wars. There obviously is stuff there, but it's not the same way as it was the first 5 seasons. So, that one is completely released as part of Clone Wars Legacy. That should be finished in the same way that Bad Batch was. Even if there's some changes and edits, like how Bad Batch cut out like a couple scenes here and there, just do it. I think that should be released at some point. Um, I don't think it's gonna happen now, unfortunately, but I would love to see it because there's some really funny, cool things there. Like Anakin just randomly being a super good gunslinger too. Like it just feels like you're playing Star Wars: The Old Republic, where you're just like, yeah, I'll pick up guns. My stats are good enough to pull this off, even though I'm mainly a melee lightsaber wielder, right? It was pretty funny to see cool stuff like that. See stuff that's directly connected to the Death Star eventuality there. That'd be such cool things that would make sense, especially in a post Rogue One world, right? That stuff was made way before Rogue One was ever even conceived, and it worked so well, right? Especially with how much Andor and everything has fleshed that out. It's frustrating that we don't have that stuff, right? Um, but if there's a nice happy compromise release, like the latest drafts of every script, right? Or like the ones that you feel like, "Okay, this is gonna be canon. Should only be interpreted as canon." I think that would be good enough. Make a cool audio drama out of it, right? With Mark Thompson, or maybe you can bring back the Clone Wars voice actors to do that. And I think that'd be a great way of, like, being like, "Okay, this is some stories that you hear as, like, whispers or, like, transmissions across the Clone Wars, or, like, the final moments, the final myths coming out of the end of the wars," right? Like, I think that'd be a great way to both canonize it without having to put too much money and effort, which they clearly don't want to because they pulled down Legacy so long ago, right? It's so hard to find these animatics for stuff that was finished, like Crystal Crisis. So I really doubt they'd go in and I can't give you a date because I don't think they have any date in mind now. They've got so many other priorities now. 2013, 14, 15, that was probably like a top 5 priority at one point. But even then, they were like, "Okay, here's unfinished, good enough. This is the best we can do. We're moving on to Rebels." If they're not gonna do it then, they're not gonna do it now, so that would be the closest thing that I think to a compromise. Finalized script, voice acted by all the Clone Wars actors and whoever else would be new and cool to add in that we've gotten from Rebels and Bad Batch and Resistance. Put those guys in there, bam, cool title like, transmissions at the end of Clone Wars or something like that. Just something that plays with the idea of, like, these are stories that are kinda told around by clones to each other or, like, the CIS and all them. This is what actually happened. This is the script. Bam. I think that'd be cool. I think that's the most reasonable way of something like that happening now in 2025.
Well, I think just titling it Clone Wars Legacy and posting it on
Yeah.
Disney Plus is a way it can work. Don't make it season 8 because I think season 7 is such a great final chapter, but hosting it as, the unreleased Clone Wars season, Clone Wars Legacy, it's something they could do. I think it's never out of the question considering it's conceived, started, voice acted, all in the Clone Wars style, all in the Clone Wars family. That is still by far their biggest hit animation wise. It's one of the most beloved Star Wars properties ever. They could absolutely do that. But I think if they did, it would either be a surprise announcement. Somewhere like Celebration would be a place to do it because you'd have people surrounding you who would be excited about that. It would be really hyped and would know what it is. But other than that, it would be a surprise announcement, or it would be something that we start to kind of hear about rumors of, the way we also heard rumors and leaks of Tales of the Jedi before that was announced. I think it would be something that might be built up towards, but who knows? Hopefully it does happen. I would love to see them give credence to it. And if not, just bring back the page on StarWars.com, like make it accessible to people. Why? I don't know why they ever took it down. The only reason to take it down is if you're going to do something with it. So bring it back in some form. Brandon Tran says, hello there. I don't know if there are several movies outside of Star Wars you're interested in seeing this year, but have you seen the trailers for Naked Gun, Karate Kid Legends, Jurassic World Rebirth, and Tron Ares? Yeah, I have seen the trailers for all of them.
Yeah.
Naked Gun surprisingly looks funny. I mean, it's Liam Neeson, who's like kind of underrated as a comedian, but he has been pretty funny in things in the past. Naked Gun 1, the original Naked Gun, is one of my favorite spoof movies. Leslie Nielsen is great. I mean, he's great in Airplane as well, but there's something about Naked Gun that's just really, really funny. I've always enjoyed that film. So I, to be honest, didn't even know it was coming out until the trailer came out. And now that the trailer came out, it does actually look pretty fun. Karate Kid, also another one that when the first trailer came out for it, what was it, a few months ago, surprisingly looked good. I'm not somebody who's kept up with like Cobra Kai or anything. I do like the Karate Kid movies, or at least the first one was a movie that I watched a lot growing up, and I had a kind of an affinity for when I was younger. Never really liked the Jaden Smith one, and never saw the sequels to Karate Kid. So it was something that was not really in the forefront of my mind, but hearing what all the other people talked about with Cobra Kai, it sounded cool, and seeing the first trailer looked awesome. So I'm pretty excited for that. Jurassic World, I'm not going to be excited for it until I hear that it's good. I never didn't really like any of the Jurassic World movies that much. The first one's all right. It's fun. It's fun in that requel style, but it's not a great movie. The next two I thought were really bad. So not going to be that excited for that. And then Tron Ares, I'm excited for just because I think Tron is such a cool IP. I still have to rewatch Tron Legacy because we had a fan on our channel for a while who was always telling us that's such a great movie. You got to rewatch that. So I got to rewatch that one. But I watched the first original Tron like a year or two ago for the first time, and wasn't really that impressed by the story of it. So it's just like, it's always been something to me that my favorite part of Tron has been the actual video game itself that they made after the game came out, playing that in arcades. I have a lot of good memories playing Tron in arcades. The other favorite thing I like about Tron is the the concept, but it's kind of another one like Jurassic World. Hard for me to get too excited about Tron Ares until I hear it's good because I just haven't been that impressed by Tron ever. Nothing to me has been terrible. Like even Legacy, I saw it in the theaters back in the day. I didn't dislike it, but it wasn't something that left an impression on me. So out of those four, I'd say Karate Kid's the one I'm most excited for. I'll give Tron number two just because I think it could be a really cool concept. Naked Gun 3 and Jurassic Park last until they make a good one. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of other movies this year because you kind of asked that in the question. Are there several other movies besides Star Wars that you're excited to see this year? I'm excited for lots of things this year. But just those four are kind of lower on my excitement level. Like I don't even know if I'd put them in like my top 10 most excited movies of the year. But they have some promise, I would say, especially Karate Kid. I think looks really good.
Yeah, I've seen all the trailers as well. I watched the first 5 seasons of Cobra Kai, um, and then, I really liked it when it was, like, the YouTube Premium shows, YouTube Red shows the first 2 seasons, and then Netflix did pretty good for the first couple seasons. I thought season 5 was a little off, and I've heard the first part of season 6 is not great, and then it progressively gets better in season part 2, and then part 3 was a really strong finish. My understanding of Karate Kid Legends is, like, you're taking the Karate Kid remake, which is really just the Kung Fu Kid, not the Karate Kid. And then they're like making it like two that new trailer is like two branches of the same tree. So like they're just I mean, if you have a chance to use Jackie Chan, why not, right? I'd love to see current Jaden Smith just randomly show up with him now versus as a kid, just like as like an observer or something. I think that'd be pretty cool. I know like my understanding Cobra Kai didn't bring back um what's her name? Hilary Swank, the next Karate Kid. I guess she was, like, pregnant during filming or something the one time that she was, like, down for it or something. So, put her in there. That'd be kinda cool, so that way there's, like, some finality for how well Cobra Kai connected everything to those original 3 movies. Kinda just missed out on that. I still haven't seen that one. I saw 1 a lot as a kid. 2 and 3, I had only seen clips of, but recently saw them last month fully. So I was like, "Okay, cool," and then kinda got busy catching up on, um, what is it called? Invincible, and then I just got caught up on Wheel of Time this past weekend, so, now I'm trying to catch up on the Netflix shows to get a Daredevil, Born Again, which I'm just gonna miss, I just know that, but I I'm trying to get back into Cobra Kai. It's probably gonna be something pretty soon that I rewatch after I give myself, a little bit of time to watch the next Karate or the new Karate Kid or whatever that Hilary Swank one is called. Just to get through all of it. But yeah, I my understanding is like it said 3 years after Cobra Kai, and like during some test screenings, they added in a couple scenes, like they added in, um, I mean, obviously Daniel LaRusso is a big character. He's one of the senseis, right? So that's cool. But they got Johnny Lawrence, especially with how big of a character is, how Cobra Kai is kind of really about him. Apparently, he has a cameo scene or something happening now. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of the characters from the kids, teenagers, like, pop up during that final tournament just to, like, watch, be like, "Oh, that kid's promise, he's pretty good," right? Like, just, like, as a nice nod to that show. Because I think when they were filming it, it was, like, kind of supposed to be mostly standalone, just respecting Cobra Kai's place, but now it's, like, with how strong it ended, just how big of a legacy that it's become even more so with this final 6th season, instead of fading away, I think they probably added in a couple more things that they're hiding from us, just, like, cool cameos and connections here and there, so excited for that one. Jurassic World Rebirth, again, I've said it last stream, I don't understand why they're calling it Jurassic World. Call it Jurassic Park Rebirth, and I would be even more down for that. I saw The Creator last year with a friend, from Garrett Edwards, and that's an excellent film showcase of, like, what really planning out your shots and your previs will actually do to reduce your budget, especially with Hollywood really being strained, even blockbuster level filmmaking, with overinflated budgets and everything. So I would love, to see what he's done. It looks great, honestly. I think a lot of the action already looks pretty stunning in a way that I think maybe Fallen Kingdom looked pretty good for me, but the Dominion just looked terrible, and I never watched those last 2, but those look terrible, right? So, this one feels like it's really fresh, it looks really big. I feel like Jurassic World, but with an actual investment in the action and the thriller elements and the adrenaline that is there in that original Jurassic Park, and frankly, even in Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World, and Jurassic Park 3, so something that just felt weightless a lot of times, and I'm very curious why this one feels so much more rich that way. But again, like I said, Edwards can do incredible action. It's the writing with him that I'm always worried about, right? Like, is he gonna pull that off? Because Creator was just tropes and ideas kinda stitched together, and I was like, "Cool. Looks incredible. Looks like awesome concept art brought to life, and that's it." Right? So, need to see what that's gonna be there. I've only seen the first Naked Gun. I've never seen a Police Academy. I've never seen the other sequels to it, but, I thought it was pretty good when I saw it, like, a year or 2 years ago. But I did find myself laughing out at Liam Neeson coming in as, like, the girl and then taking off the mask and suddenly growing out to full size. Like, that's the type of gags that I think we've missed from, like, that sort of '80s gag comedy filmmaking that it doesn't make sense, and it shouldn't, right? That's the whole point of it. It's slapstick, it's, absurdist, it's everything. I just love that final shot of, like, all the fact that they're literally making everyone like a child or like of, like, the original cast, and then there's that final shot of OJ, and his kid is just like, don't really can't really miss him compared to everybody else here crying and mourning. I think really smart humor, so I'm very excited for that, so it's I'm not saying I have, like, a lot of nostalgia for it, but I'm like, That's cool." That's cool, right? I think I'm more excited than I thought hearing that they're gonna, like, make a remake of it, and now that it's not really a remake, it's almost like a spiritual sequel in that world. I'm cool with that. I'm pretty excited for that, so yeah, but I wouldn't say those are my films that I'm thinking about the most. I'm definitely thinking more about Tron. I am a big fan of Legacy soundtrack, Daft Punk. Still to this day, always listen to that. I absolutely love it. I haven't seen the original one yet. I've only seen clips. So I'd like to see that. Remember seeing some episodes of Star Tron Uprising, and I thought it was pretty good. It was a shame it got canceled. I mean, I think Disney really thought it was gonna be, like, so much bigger, right? And I think visually, it still is that legacy film stands the test of time. Still incredible. There's only some, like, stuff with that we probably would have used deepfake for Jeff Bridges in his version of Clue and all that, but yeah, I don't know if I love Jared Leto as the main actor, and it kinda bridging into the world is still something that I figured was always gonna happen, but not dealing with Sam and Cora's plot lines from the original, like what was set up there bums me out. But if this does well and then you can bring them back in a 4th film, cool, cool. I hope this is a case of, like, they've got some great actors, they've got a sharp budget, they got, Nine Inch Nails doing a really great music score because obviously Daft Punk's retired, and then it does well, and then you're like, "Okay, let's highlight everything that was in Legacy and stuff that we missed from the original Tron and then connect into here." Cool. I'd love that. I don't expect it to be a good film, honestly. I kinda expecting it to be worse than Legacy. I think Legacy is just a decent film that a lot of the emotions are carried by that soundtrack and so good. But if Nine Inch Nails can do the same thing here and there's enough good action, enough, groundbreaking technology shown off in this film, I'm happy for Tron just getting another thing added to its canon. It's always a cool thing to see. Long-standing franchises always get a little bit new things like every 10, 15 years. But yeah, I wanna say I'm excited for it. It looks pretty good, but, you know, there's always great trailers for terrible shows and movies.
Yeah, and if Disney's gonna go back to their franchise well, I always prefer it when they go back to one of their original franchises because Tron, Pirates, those things are the things that, like, built Disney live action before they acquired MCU, before they acquired
Yeah.
Star Wars. Like, those are the heart of what Disney was, and so instead of these constant remakes of their animated movies, I'd rather them bring these out, but they try them every 10 years or so, mostly because they don't make that much money like Tron. So, we shall see. Hopefully it does well. I'm hoping it's great. I love, as you guys know from our channel, I love sci-fi and I love fantasy. So if there's a great new sci-fi movie, that's only makes me more excited to go to the movies than not. So I hope it's great, but I've never been a huge Tron person, except the game. The game is really fun. If you guys haven't found one in an arcade, you should look it up. It's pretty fun. Brandon also says, non-Star Wars question about real science. Thoughts on extinction species, the dire wolf being brought back to life today. Yeah, I heard about that. I can't say I read much about it yet, but it sounds pretty cool. Um, at first, when I heard about it, I thought it was maybe a joke because of direwolves mostly being famous for Game of Thrones. But it is pretty neat. And it's always cool to see advances like that in science. So I'll have to do a little more research after the show.
Yeah, I looked into it a little bit. They didn't, like, find, like, frozen embryos and, like, give birth to them or something, like, they didn't bring it back in the same sense. It's more like they took gray wolves and de-engineered some of their DNA, I think using CRISPR technology or whatever, and then they were able to, like, rewrite it to a more primal version, which would be the direwolf, so that way they can hear how a direwolf would sound like and all that for the first time ever, right? Besides just written records of, like, ancient mythological texts, right? That's not really gonna be concrete evidence for us. So it's cool. It's just not. It's just wolves, gray wolves carrying the direwolf genes that are like hybrids. So it's not like they're like back in the wild and all that. It's more like a lab experiment that was just, let's say, like, hey, let's change a couple things in the genome sequencing. So I don't want to be harshing the vibe here. It'd be very cool if the direwolves are truly back, but it's more of like a, "Hey, let's see what we can do to change the sequencing of the DNA of its descendants 10,000 years later and see, like, what we can do to simplify it and bring it back to how it was before." So, direwolves aren't back, but, it's cool that we have a better understanding of them now.
Badasai says, "Have you guys read the Realm of the Elderlings series? 16 books. I'm reading the first one, 3 chapters in, and I'm hooked. If you don't know, search it real quick. It's highly regarded." Yeah, I've heard of it. It's Robin Hobb. So I've always wanted to read it. I've heard it's great. Don't really know much about it at all, other than I've heard it's great. And looking forward to reading it one day if I ever get there. But yeah, it sounds really cool, and I'm always interested in fantasy stories, and I've always heard it's one of the best ones.
Yeah, I heard it's like a lot of different trilogies all kind of connected together and then like one quadrilogy. So it's not like a one continuous story. It's like a lot of stories that are building off each other but are like in different parts of the world. So I've heard good things. I'm just trying to deal with Wheel of Time first and Dune. Those have been multiple years now at this point, and I'm just like I'm trying. Those are dense enough. Fantasy, epic fantasy of any kind is so detailed, so dense, so structured to keeping track of all that while you're doing other fantasy books is it's a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and for me, like, I have a hard time we listen to so many Star Wars audiobooks too because we get the free, review copies for Star Wars audiobooks when they come out rather than reading them, so, like, that's great because it gives you the ability to listen in your spare time or listen if you're driving or exercising or whatever. But for me, it's really Star Wars is a special thing with audiobooks because I'm great at listening to Star Wars audiobooks because I know the world so well. I know it
Yeah.
inside and out, but it would be really tough to like listen in your free time to a new fantasy world that you've never read new high fantasy and then be like, oh, like I don't know what is
Oh,
going
man.
on. So I would want to read that and sit down and like fully read it. But every once in a while I'll get the itch to like start a new series, and when I do, I get really invested in and I go all the way. Like I read all the Witcher books a few years ago, but The Witcher was only 7 books long, or 8 books long. This would be a big undertaking. So yeah, one day maybe I'll check it out and hopefully read the first book and be as hooked as you are. Turkish says, "Hi fellas, hi Turkish. Hope you're having a good night." Batasai says, Pablo Hidalgo said those stories are still considered part of the canon, even if they were unproduced. Oh, I think this is in regards to your discussion earlier about the Clone Wars Legacy projects. Yeah, they are considered canon, even though basically nobody can watch them anymore unless you find a rip somewhere. But yeah, they are considered canon still. The Rebel Sith says, "Is the stream cutting in and out for everyone?" Hopefully, when you commented that, it got better later on. Rebel Sith also says, Ventress's body was put in stasis by Obi-Wan and Quinlan for a month or so before they lay her to rest in the life waters. Remember that from Dark Disciple. yes, that's part of the, it's part of the whole reason why she can come back. Doesn't really
Yeah.
change how I feel again, but not to go back into that topic. But yes, it is a part of that epilogue.
Yeah, you gotta emphasize that stuff. If you're gonna do that, cool. Like, you're gonna show that interesting fire revival thing, great, but you have to also show her being buried too, honestly, that's what I would say. You need to show that pivotal scene there. You gotta show her die, right? At least some flash or, like, have her revive and almost like everything's rushing back into her head, and then you see all these crazy visuals around her. You gotta do something like that, and you gotta make it iconic for her, right? Tales of the Jedi, I think, has done some really iconic things for Dooku, obviously, with Yaddle, and Ahsoka, like, you understand a little bit more about how she fights off in the Clone Wars. I didn't really find anything too iconic for Barriss and for, Morgan Elsbeth, right? There wasn't really an iconic scene or iconic visual that you can really clue in for those. Like, yeah, there's some cool things with, like, the ice caves with Barriss. Again, that story is just way too compressed. If they can get some iconic scenes for, Cad Bane and his, like, origin and connection to Dark Times, and then everything they're trying to do with Ventress here with her revival, great. That's learn that lesson from Tales of the Jedi because that's definitely one of the things it really stuck out with. Like, the visuals of that still are sharper in my mind, even if the Ahsoka stories aren't so much better than the Barriss and the Morgan stories to me.
Well, we have about 10 minutes left in our stream, everybody. So if you want to send in those last questions or you want to make sure you get something on tonight's stream, send in a super chat, helps out the channel, gets your chat guaranteed to be answered on tonight's stream. So if you have any last questions, comments, theories, anything you'd like to discuss, send it into the chat via super chat. Check out our Patreon, YouTube membership programs because if you're at the Rebel tier or higher, you do get a chance to get priority chat as well. We're going to continue going through the chat here until the stream is up. And that is going to continue here with Turkish, who says, not Star Wars related, but are you guys watching the studio? I've heard great things about the studio so far. I've not gotten to watch it, but it sounds really cool. Sounds pretty fun. And I'm looking forward to checking it out.
I'd like to as well, but so much backlog.
yeah. Yeah. So much. So many things to watch, so little time. Arjun P says a few minutes behind, but love your point about the naming convention, Sanak. And then we answered Saint here. So I think we're going back to Arjun again, who says, do you think we hear about a new live action series at Celebration after Andor? All that we know about on that front is Ahsoka season 2, which they've hinted at being the last season. That's the hope, is that we hear something, or at least the continuation of something, whether it is Ahsoka season 3 just getting announced, or whether they tell us what the future is of the Mandalorian, or the long rumored Book of Boba Fett season 2 getting announced. Something and some type of continuation here for the future into 2026, into 2027. I think it's something that's on the board. But that being said, one of the things I've said in the past is that part of it would give me more confidence if they just didn't announce anything. It would mean they're fully putting all their chips in the Mandalorian and Grogu basket. They're comfortable with Ahsoka season 2 being what rides out next year. And then in 2026, we'll get like the next slate of Disney Plus shows and what they're planning on doing on Disney Plus in conjunction with what their vision is for Mandalorian on the big screen. Because I think until we get that first movie, until we get legitimate, huge information about that film, I think a lot of their plans around Disney Plus are up in the air because if that film bombs, then we're looking at the Mandalorian possibly returning to TV because it was already a big hit on TV, right? So I think they're kind of waiting it out. They can't wait out until the movie comes out, obviously, because they won't be able to get TV into production to come out in 2027 if they wait until the movie comes out and then they're like, okay, now we greenlight season 4 Mandalorian. They're going to have some plans. I just don't necessarily expect a big slate this year. Personally, I'm expecting an announcement of a second or third season or a fourth season of one of their shows that already exists if we do get announcement on live action TV. If not, I think they're going to focus on animation and focus on Mandalorian and Grogu or some of the other big movies they've announced, like Sean Levy's movie. Maybe we could get more information on that, what the future is, what the direction is, when they're shooting. Is Ryan Gosling in there? I think that would be one of the major surprise announcements that they would focus on. Then the next thing would be Dawn of the Jedi, which they've already announced as well. So I think they're going to focus on the movie side for live action here for this celebration, with the caveat of getting more information on Ahsoka season 2. But since they haven't started shooting Ahsoka season 2 yet either, we don't. I don't think they're going to give a trailer or anything for that. But I think they'll talk about it for sure.
Yeah, I have a lot of the same feelings too. I want to say there's a new live action series, but like I've been talking about before, like Arjun brought up, like they need to like name these shows better, right? Especially if these are going to be stuff that's building different parts of the galaxy for the Mandoverse. It's got to make more sense. Like if like still to this day, why did we call it Book of Boba Fett if it's not really chapters of his life and his show's going to get hijacked? Why did we call it the Ahsoka show when it's really a pseudo rebel fight, right? Like, why is it called Obi-Wan Kenobi when he's going by Ben for the most part, and Kenobi's would have been a great connection to the books and kind of the Western vibes that that series starts off with, right? So, whatever they announce, I hope it's like, "Oh, actually, we're taking Book of Boba Fett season 2 and changing it into, like, the Underworld series or whatever." Like, something that, like, is focused on bounty hunters or whatever, like, so that way or whatever the daimyo, actually not in daimyo, that's too specific, but something that's a little bit more general that like brings about like, hey, this is a show about the underworld with Boba being a huge player in it, and then maybe bring a talent card, etc. Right? Cool. Ahsoka's show, you can't rename it now. It's gonna finish season 2, fine, and it's gonna be more focused on her anyways, because you've returned Ezra back to the main galaxy, returned Thrawn to back to the main galaxy. Even if the cameo, like, with stuff happening in the main galaxy, it's still gonna be mostly Ahsoka as the lead there. Cool with that there. Whatever's supposed to fill a gap, if they're doing another show like Rangers of the New Republic, Rogue Squadron, and all that, those work because it's more of an entity. It's about like a group. It's about like people in a specific scenario, right? That's what needs to happen. I hope whatever they announce deals with that. Do I think there's gonna be another live action show for the Mandoverse right now? No. Like Liam said, all eggs are in the basket of the Mandalorian Grogu. If anything, I think there's a better chance that after Ahsoka season 2, there's like a show that takes a lot of a movie that takes a lot of threads of that and combines it into like the Mandalorian and Grogu 2 with a different name, obviously. I don't even love the Mandalorian Grogu as a name. It's a pretty bad name, honestly. It's like
Yeah.
it could be something way more exciting, and they've doubled down on it. Okay, fine. If this is their showcase, fine, cool. But whatever happens next, it can't be called Mandalorian Grogu colon blah 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 blah. Blah. It should just be a different name. The Mandalorian, the name of the subtitle, the name of the sort of chapter, what we're approaching into, right? Stuff like that should happen next. But, that's maybe they do change it, Revenge of the Jedi was the name for a long time until, like, 80 days before the film came out, and they're like, "Wait, that just doesn't work, guys." And we haven't seen, like, a trailer yet, so maybe they're still, workshopping that. I mean, they've already workshopped the season 4 into a show from a show into a movie. Why can't they workshop the name when we still got, like, a whole year out, right? So, hopefully things change there. I'd love for that. That'd be a big announcement, honestly, if people are asking for big announcements at Celebration.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
changing it to, like, The Mandalorian subtitle something. Great, yeah, I think people will be way more excited for that than Mandalorian and Grogu, right? But, if they are The Mandalorians instead of calling them Mandalorian and Grogu, right? Like, that'd be great that way too, but I don't know. We'll figure out what comes there. I just don't see another show. See maybe an animated show, like a Dark Time show, but if we get anything live action that isn't from the shows that are currently running, consolidated Book of Boba Fett season 2-ish, or having like a special presentation that has Luke, Han, and Leia. Those are the only 2 things I can really see.
Thomas Fry says, "Hey lads, you know what Legends novel you'll be covering next? Just finished Shatterpoint, and your coverage of it was very insightful. Thanks for what you guys do." Well, we appreciate that. Glad you're enjoying the Legends novel coverage. That's something we need to get on. We need to pick what our next Legends book club is. We just did X-Wing, which was a big one in November, December. We released the 4 reviews of that and then did the live stream. But that live stream did pretty well. We had a lot of fun talking with you guys about Legends. So we want to do another live stream for a Legends book club episode. We've debated and actually our Patreon members get to pick what our Legends Book Club book is. We give them 4 options they get to pick. So if you were a member of Patreon or YouTube memberships, you get to pick that book. So check that out. But we we've debated on doing live streams for ones like Shatterpoint that we've covered in the past, just to be
Yeah.
able to have that actual book club discussion with you guys, because we weren't doing it that way. We're just doing reviews and kind of having a book club discussion on our own, but not with our community. We're hoping you guys would comment and all that jazz, but it didn't really work out that way. And I think the live stream element worked a lot better for getting your guys' feedback and interests on the specific books. So we're definitely intending on continuing that. One thing that I've reviewed a bunch of Legends books since then, for because I review all the Essential Legends collections ones that have new audiobooks because they send us the audiobooks for a review. And so I just did Force Unleashed and I did Dark Lord: The Rise of Darth Vader. And we didn't do I should have done live streams for those, but we didn't do live streams. I know this summer there are some cool ones coming, and we don't know which ones are getting audiobooks yet, I don't think, but one of the exciting ones would be Shadows of the Empire. So hopefully we get an
Mm,
audiobook of that. We can review that on the channel, and then do uh, an episode of Legends Book Club live for that. But yeah, not sure yet, Thomas. But if you guys, if you Thomas, if you're still watching, or if you watch on replay and you can hear your question getting answered, if you have any suggestions, anything you guys would want to see, let us know. We will ultimately put it up to the vote of our Patreon members and YouTube membership members to choose the final topic. The only times when that won't necessarily be the case will be when we do get these ones for review, because we will, have to review those ones. And so whether it's me by myself or it's both of us reviewing them, we will eventually, get to them. So if I guess one of the things you can let us know though is if there is, out of all the books we've already reviewed in the comics we've already reviewed, are there any specific ones that you guys would like to see an episode for? I mean, obviously the ones that are most popular, like Thrawn trilogy or Shatterpoint or Revan, Dark Empire, those things we definitely consider doing episodes for. So if you guys would like to see that, let us know. Your feedback is always very helpful in choosing what we do next.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, we got reviews for like Raid Squadron that Liam already did. I finally caught up on all those books. So if we want to continue the X-Wing path, we can do that. We can stay in the New Republic. We can jump back to Old Republic, standalone novels, like Scourge and all that. Like there's a lot of ways to approach it. Um, Admittedly, we've been just busier with the start of the year personally, and then there hasn't been a lot of Star Wars going. We could also just do a tie-in for not May the 4th, but for the Revenge of the Sith May 25th release. You could just do the
Yeah.
Revenge of the Sith novel. If Liam might be able to get a copy by then. We could show that off in the live stream, talk about that. Some of the annotations, especially, right? That could be something really cool to discuss, especially for people who don't really have the means or much interest in, buying the copy themselves, but wanna hear people's thoughts on it, like collectors' thoughts and stuff. We can do stuff like that, let us know. We've been talking about the Discord for a long time. I do have it mostly set up, I just haven't finalized it, and I'm hoping to get that done this week so we can get some build up and getting you guys being able to put questions on live streams like this there earlier, and, helping us decide on, like, polls, helping us decide on Legends Book Club, tabletop games in the future, stuff like that, right? Like, we wanna make that a hub, but, it's been busy. It's been busy outside of the channel, so we're ramping back up, like, it might be a good place for people to discuss, like, "Hey, how exactly do you want Andor to be covered on our channel?" And I'll take that into serious consideration there too, so yeah, it's all coming about, we finally gotten a little bit more calmer schedules for both of us now lined up, so, you've been seeing us drop a lot of, like, clips, from our streams, edited out, and those have been doing pretty well on the channel. Seems like you guys are enjoying that, especially if you haven't been able to join on the live stream initially. That's a great way for you guys to re-engage with some of the cool questions that you guys put out there. I know what our responses are, so yeah, let us know there. Let us know everywhere you can, and once we get the Discord up, let us know there too.
So our last question of the night is going to be from the Chris, who says, "Hey guys, if you were able to do a massive course correction for the brand, where would you start? Is it going in with the Yuuzhan Vong story for Rey's New Jedi Order, Old Republic multimedia project, Legends continuation post Crucible in novel and comic format for me personally, but it ain't gonna happen. I don't think respect legacy characters and hire better writers or be less political has ever been a satisfactory answer to this question. Curious where you guys go with it. Well, that's a great question. It's a big question. Probably round out our, our stream here um, with a little bit longer answer. But there's so many directions they can go, and I think not. I don't think any of them are necessarily wrong. They just need to commit to one and push forward. I think, as you've heard me say so many times on these streams, the thing I'm looking for from Lucasfilm and from Disney mostly is commitment. They've shown a huge lack of commitment with Star Wars thus far. There have been very few things that they've announced and said, this is going to be multiple seasons like Andor season 2. We are going to make 2 seasons of Andor, and that is our plan. That's our project. That's the way we greenlit it. We are going to make a continuous, ongoing show like The Mandalorian, and it's going to go multiple seasons. They have made so many miniseries. It's been a problem with Marvel as well. So many miniseries to just test things out that by the time they decide they want to do more of something, it falls flat because people aren't that interested anymore. I'm very intrigued by what Andor does. Now, I think Andor has a leg up just because a lot of people came late to the party on Andor, so it might feel fresher to other people. Whereas, like people like us and probably you watching, we watched it when it came out. So it feels like a long time, but some people were late to the party on it. They didn't watch it until it got its Emmy nominations or it really got talked about in high regard across the community. But they, took forever to make a season 2 of that, even though they had already greenlit season 2. Ahsoka season 2 is going to come out over almost 3 years after season 1 came out. A lot of these MCU shows have never got a second season. So I just think commitment is a big thing. Create a plan, commit to it. If it fails, okay, it fails, but I think almost every show should be greenlit with the idea of having at least 2 seasons in it.
Yeah.
If it fails miserably, okay, you don't have to do the second season, but commit to doing your story if that's what you're trying to do with it, and then shoot 2 seasons at a time. After you shoot the second season, and if the first season is a disaster, then maybe hold up on shooting the third season until you see how the second season does. If it's well received, if the critic reviews are bad and the performance is bad, then you can't do much with it. But as for the things you're talking about for the direction of like the story overall, I think both directions are specifically needed in terms of live action for Rey and for Old Republic. I think Old Republic would be a great direction for them to go. And as I've said in the past, I think the main way to do it would be a multimedia project centering around a huge, big budget, practical Andor esque, Game of Thrones esque live action TV show because the stories of the Old Republic, while amazing and epic in scope and fit for the big screen, I think are better suited to the long form storytelling that
Yeah.
we've seen done so well for specifically video game adaptations on TV. The Last of Us is coming out next week. As a huge fan of that game, somebody who's played the first one like 5 or 6 times, and then the second one I played twice and was more underwhelmed by the way it was structured and paced. But overall, the story I think is interesting. The Last of Us season or Last of Us 2, but not to get on a tangent about that and not spoil that for anybody. But I think video game adaptations, as we have been proven over the years between Last of Us or Fallout, video games are long form storytelling, and so they work much better as a long form format on the TV screen rather than being adapted into film. You can take some of the major conflicts, like I think you could take some of the major stuff of KOTOR and put it into a movie or a duology or a trilogy, but it's a lot more difficult than to create a multi-season structured show that you commit to, like, we're gonna make 5 seasons of this, and we're gonna do it regardless of what the viewership is, and if after season 2 or 3, it's really just abysmal, then we'll cancel it, but we're planning on making 5 seasons, and that's our plan. I think that would be such a breath of fresh air for Star Wars because it's a time period we haven't tackled in forever. It's a time period that's beloved. It's a time period and characters that most people, most of the wider general audience are not familiar with, and it can give you room for epic storytelling. So I think that's big there. And I do think it's big to continue with Rey. I know that's not a popular opinion amongst a certain sect of the fandom, but it's important because that's where you've left your Star Wars legacy so far. So if you're going to transition to the next phase, the next era, the future generations, you have to deal with that character and you have to deal with the repercussions of what just happened with the galaxy. And in order to do that, you've got to tackle that character. Now, Yuuzhan Vong, I don't know if that's necessarily the direction to go. I think one of the reasons why Yuuzhan Vong works so well, and one of the reasons New Jedi Order works so well, is even though there aren't too many exceptional books in that initiative, the initiative is compelling because you want to keep reading to find out what's next. It helps that the ending is one of the best parts. It helps that the middle chapters of the series are some of the best parts, even if the beginning, the first book, Vector Prime, is really good. After that, it's a little bit more slow. This is a little bit more difficult to get into, but once you get into like Edge of Victory and beyond into that middle chapters of the initiative, it really goes. But one of the big thing with New Jedi Order is that you're able to do that because there's so many characters and so many different factions and so many different elements of the EU that you're bringing in for one big epic Avengers like event storytelling, comic book esque event storytelling. Um, if you were to do that with Ray, it just wouldn't want to have the same impact. And I think ultimately you'd be comparing, like, if you avoid the comparisons from Legends to canon as much as possible, then it leaves less ammunition for people who are already wanting to hate something to compare it to the old stuff. Because inevitably, as we've seen with a lot of book adaptations, it would be hard for it to be better than the book. And if you're already making it, directly compared. That's why I wish they didn't call it New Jedi Order, just because you're directly comparing it to both stories. But regardless, I don't know if you should do Yuuzhan Vong, but I think they should do some type of new extragalactic threat, new threat that we've never seen before. Avoid the dark side, avoid things we like, some Nihil equivalent or something. Avoid stuff that we've seen or read before, and make it something new and different, and give Rey her own 2 feet to stand on in a story that's not tied down to the rest of the nostalgia that sequels really delve into as like a base for their storytelling, where it's, literally just the Empire versus the Rebellion once again. Give her her own thing. So I think both are very important. As in regards to your comment about you would just wish they would just continue writing Legends and continue with Crucible, I think that would be a brilliant idea for them. I've been on record so many times saying they should just continue Legends or continue it in a different universe. I mean, Legends is already technically its own universe, but if they wanted to do live action adaptations or even animated adaptations of Legends stories, it would be great to just continue in and be like, this is a different universe. We've seen that so many times over the years. I think general audiences would be okay with it. We're in the heyday of multiverse storytelling right now with things like MCU or Spider Verse or Everything Everywhere All at Once. There's so many stories in the last 5-6 years that have tackled multiverse, and I think audiences are completely okay and understand that if an actor is different than the actor that's in the movie, or the story is different than the story that's in the movie, it's a different story. There will be some people who are still confused, but generally, I think people will get on board. And if that universe starts to take off better or just as well as the main Star Wars universe we have, like, yeah, it might be kind of admitting defeat as a company, being like, oh God, like now we're returning to the books that everybody wanted us to adapt, and that's doing way better than our stuff. Sure, it would be a little embarrassing in that regard, but you could still make a lot of money doing that. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it's about, is making money and making products that people like, because if people like it, you make more money and people will go see it. So I would wish they would continue Legends, at the very least, just continuing in books. That's the easiest way to do it, because books, comics, not much of the audience reads that anyways. So deliver that for the fans who were reading it forever, who were into it, who were in this small kind of niche group away from the rest of the general fan base, and give them something to be happy about again on that side. But don't stop your storytelling on the other side, continue it. There's room for both. Star Wars can have both, and if you were able to create two distinct versions of Star Wars that were distinctly different from each other, you could double your profit because you could have a Legends movie come out one year, and then the next year the canon movie comes out, or the canon show, or the canon book, and then the Legends comic comes out, and it's like you have fans who like different things. Like DC's doing that for years, and they have that with the Batman right now. Like Superman, if people don't like the Superman movie, they still have the Batman movies by Reeves if those movies ever come out. So like there is room for both, and I think these Elseworlds tales, stuff like that, has been around forever. So I would double down on Legends. I would continue it in multiple different forms: film, live action, animation, books, comics. I would continue all that. But I think the most important thing for them to do would be defined with Andor ending. It would be define that next gold standard product, that next thing for them to say, hey, well, we might have failed you in other directions, but we still have this. And I think the Old Republic would be that place for them to do that. So that's where I would go if I was them. I would try to start fresh with something completely different, something that not a lot of people are familiar with, and something that you have a basis in lore that you could actually adapt pretty well and that you go all in on. And I think that's the main thing for me is just I want them to go all in.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The key word here is commitment, and Disney has shown and Lucasfilm has shown lack thereof so far. Seems like we're starting to turn the corner, but I'll work backwards here. Legends continuation. I personally am not as interested as Liam. I know he's also talking about like adapting all these stories and kind of working almost like a tertiary universe. Honestly, the only thing I'd kinda wanna see is, like, sort of the Jedi trilogy, like, the stuff that's bridging everything from Fate of the Jedi towards where we are in Legacy. I mean, there's a whole point of Cade seeing Alana Solo on the Throne of Balance, and then Fate of Jedi kinda deals with that, and then we don't have anything about Alana. We have a possible descendant of her that's living on a junkyard in Legacy Volume 2 that was never finished because that was when the acquisition took place. Um, but that's it, right? Like, so, I want stories that connect post Crucible, post Fate of the Jedi into what's next, into the legacy. I won't even mind having like a book sort of novelization adaptation of that because I think it's a lot of richness to those stories that sometimes early 2000s edginess kind of takes away from. More rule of cool, more, hey, look, here's a Twi'lek not wearing anything. We'll call her a Sip. Great. Okay, Talon, whatever, sure. But you could do some really interesting things with the characters in their headspaces, and they always showed some cool things, especially with how messed up Cade is and how much he's, like, repressing his force usage, repressing his memories and connections to his ancestors and all that. Deal with that story, deal with, like, a bridge story leading into volume 2, finish volume 2 out in its own story, and then lead us into that supposed throne, right? I think the idea was originally Alana Solo would have been younger and, Leia's advising her and all of that. Obviously, that doesn't happen because everyone's kinda dead by Legacy, but you could rework the idea and bring a conclusion with that other Solo daughter, right? Like, of some sorts, like, that could work, right? That descendant Solo. It'd be cool to me if you could do something like that. Again, I also have a lot of issues with where the concept of the unifying force started kind of being twisted and turned and kind of turned back to the black and white that was more prevalent in the prequels and everything. More of George Lucas' view of the force and everything. By the time we got to like Fate of the Dead and all that, I think it's a little messy there. But like at least bridge the stories. Like I don't to this day understand why the literal sword of the dead become part of the Fell Empire. Like I get it, they love each other, cool, but are you saying the Imperial Knights came out of her? Great, it can be an influence, sure, but she's the empress of an empire that her parents and kinda fought against, right, that her grandfather kinda brought about, like, I never really liked the apologia there with the Imperial stuff there, even if I do really like the Fel Empire in Legacy, I just don't understand where Jagged to Road really makes sense with Jyn in the picture there, so if you could explain it well, good, sure. Do that with those sort of Jedi books, do that with some other stuff, and then finish off sometime just after or at the very end of like a legacy, like a proper legacy volume 3, but in book form. That's where I would leave it at because the further you go out, the more complication, the more weight of a lot of the later EU decisions start becoming more important and impactful. I think Legacy just obviously didn't have to deal with that because it came out in 2006. That's when it started. Fate of the Jedi was definitely later. It's not really beholden to any of that, but then you still have to make it work, right? So, that's kinda where I'd put it. Let's just finish right at, like, a hypothetical Legacy Volume 3. I think that's a good place to not start to get overburdened again with a lot of the late EU decisions. So, that's where I would say for Legends continuation. I think you gotta explain a lot of crazy jumps that happen by the time of Legacy that they can kinda walk away as, like, we're just remixing Star Wars, but when you put all the timeline together, does it actually make a lot of sense with where things were being left off with the books? I don't think so necessarily. As far as, like, course correction, I mean, again, comes down to commitment, comes down to, like I said, naming your shows properly, having showrunners, which they're starting to do with the MCU stuff, right? Daredevil looks like it's gonna get 3, 4 seasons at this rate, which just now and that's after, like, course correcting a lot of stuff from the original version of Born Again. Now they're already working on season 2, right? Like, that's cool. Looks like they're doing that with MCU, do that with Star Wars as well. Um, we talked about it in the days leading up to Acolyte that a writer's room made a lot of sense, especially with a lot of diverse opinions. So, people who hadn't seen Star Wars, because that, changes your biases. That makes you reckon with what you think and look at Star Wars about. It just didn't work out because it was such a huge ensemble for such short, to the bone editing. Even if you don't love the concept, if you give episode 20 more minutes, and I think that would have made way more sense for whatever they were coming out there. So, uh, that's another thing. Make the shows have longer run times. That's such a frustrating thing to Disney. It's not like you're saying it's an Amazon that doesn't really have all these decades worth of wardrobe and sets and everything and, like, huge amounts of money, like, that they have to just put into investing in new technology for. Disney has all this stuff. It has access to all the Lucasfilm stuff. It has access to so much film history in live action as well, and they choose not to, like, really push longer episodes to, like, compete with now the Amazon Primes that are pushing, now the Apple TVs, and obviously Warner Brothers with HBO Max and everything. So, you need to make these episodes longer. That's like a huge standardized 40. You don't have to maybe get 50 like some others, but a 40, that'd be great. You don't think kids can handle 40 if it looks incredible? They can. They obviously do with The Mandalorian. Why wouldn't they? And a lot of people obviously loved Andor, and those have longer run times. Come on, like, it's doable. Make that a standard. That's still a frustrating thing seeing something minus the credits be like 28 minutes. It could work for a skeleton crew because it's such low stakes, but not when you have these big monumental stories that you're trying to tell with these bunch of different miniseries building good MCU-like events. So whatever happens with these shows, with their future seasons, whether they're bumped up like Mandalorian to Mandalorian movie level status, make it make sense for the medium that it's in and make use of the medium and the budget and everything because you can. So, fix how you're doing the shows, put that I think that makes a huge difference already. I know there's already rumors that Ahsoka season 2 is gonna be using a lot of the same practical sets, and they've shifted everything over to London now, for, everything going on with season 2, so seems like they're gonna take a big jump there. I can understand season 1 being like a test run for Filoni, but make that more standardized. You'll make the money back. It's not like Star Wars is hemorrhaging money. They're just hemorrhaging trust because they're not putting anything out. They're announcing stuff and they're not putting it out. People will buy up Star Wars even if it's not great, if it's coming, right? So you gotta obviously improve that, but also put these things out. So focus on making proper TV shows, and I think that's gonna be a huge leap for like that middle ground between live action that's monumental, but live action that's like, yeah, it's something I want to see more character focuses and all that. You fix that, then you're ready for the old Republic. And I know Liam already touched on it. We touched on it on so many live streams and videos, but there's so much of the old Republic that's convoluted and doesn't work. Like the old Republic design wise just does not fit with anything else there. Right. But I do like a lot of the threads there because it's almost like trying to artificially fill in that KOTOR 3 gap. At the same time, KOTOR 1 and 2 don't really line up perfectly together. There's a lot of stuff that happens in between. That's what a TV show can really work out and flesh out. Tales of the Jedi doesn't necessarily have to be your first season. It could be another an animated series as part of multimedia, but make it so that this timeline is a proper 1,000 years, right? Like, it just doesn't work. It's way too stretched out and then way too squished together at random parts and then huge jumps, and then like I said, it doesn't really make sense that there isn't like a Dark Ages. There is kinda with the new Sith Wars, but canon really is kind of saying it isn't there, even though the High Republic technologically with hyperspace routes and everything is a little bit further behind than you'd expect for just being a couple 100 years out from the prequels. This is a great way to fix the timeline, tell the bigger stories, lead into Bane, make Bane the proper transition from that end of the Old Republic into pseudo early prequel, and take those big Sith that are necessary, make those the villains seasons each or something, right? And this is where you gotta go all out, but you can only go all out if you correct the shows that are happening in the New Republic that are more, play around with your toys, sandbox sort of stuff. So, fix that there, fix the format of that, you'll be able to jump into this, people will love that. At the same time, I want to say that you can parallel doing a Luke Skywalker Academy with Rey's future. It it kinda has to happen to some degree, at least some portion of his academy when you have Mark Hamill as such a gifted voice actor, and he can still play the role in some cool, like, mi episodes or, like, some small shorts or whatever, right? But, yeah, you have to commit to the future. Like Liam said, where did we leave off with Rey? Build out, like, not just a new Jedi Order film, but if we're gonna build a new saga out with her that's not gonna deal with, like, the second rise of fascism in the galaxy, it's gotta be its own thing, cool. Not Vong. I don't think Vong would work in visual media as much as it does in books because there's so much of the headspace of their culture, of their priestess and everything that can't be translated properly. If Dune can't be 100% translated, I don't think that Vong could without just feeling like very two-dimensional. Regardless, don't change the name too. New Jedi Order doesn't really make sense, but if it's a placeholder, sure. But yeah, let her actually have an arc where she does become that sort of Obi-Wan-esque figure for the future. She has to now, right? Build out her era that she's in. You only have a trilogy and 2 of the movies are back to back. We have a Resistance show, but it's not really about that. It should have been called Star Wars Colossus or something or Star Wars, like, Galactica or whatever. It just isn't a massive story and not a massive animated story in that era to justify that name, right? Build out the actual era, build out the consequences of everything happening in 7 and 8. Build the lead up of everything into 7, right? There isn't a lot of politics because of JJ in the sequels, but ironically, he did set up stuff that a lot of real world stuff is kind of applying to, showing how easily fascism can come back because people forget, right? You can do that again here, but now you have to build in the politics. You have to build in all that stuff. I'm not saying like you have to make it one to one with our world, but there's very numerous examples throughout history that you can remix like Star Wars always has to make the story happen. Flesh out the world, flesh out the era, flesh out New Republic's destruction, people's reaction to that, build it out, and then the consequences of episode 9. Make that an era, then you'll be able to make that springboard for her new Jedi Order film and the springboard for her Obi-Wan figure-esque story in the future films that she will inevitably be part of because you're not gonna waste Daisy Ridley when you kind of almost missed out the chance with the prequel actors and obviously never really had that much of a chance with the original trilogy actors. You do that, you get deep enough there, then I think you can just do full animation for Luke and finish up everything at his academy there, but get her started first, get her moving into live action so that way whenever we see the Luke Skywalker Academy stuff, it does feel like it's not just, oh, paralleling one to one. People want to see that more than Rey's. So that's how I'd approach it. Fix the shows, then you'd be able to jump into Old Republic. Then you'll be able to currently work on the future with Rey. It might be a little bit delayed there, but mostly in movies. Then in between, you can fill out stories like the Luke Skywalker Academy, flesh out different eras, and experiment again. You have to still have some big hitters, and the Old Republic is there. It's there to be corrected. It's there to be refined. You can love everything about that era, but you can't tell someone to read Tales of the Jedi all the way down to the Bane trilogy and say, "Yeah, doesn't that all flow perfectly?" It doesn't. So, you can't convince me as a huge Tales of the Jedi fan of those original comics that that's only set 30 years before KOTOR, and that KOTOR to the Old Republic is only 300 years. It doesn't work, and then somehow Knight Errant is only, like, 100. There's so much weird things about that timeline that if you just streamline leading in, you get a lot of people's confidence back, be familiar ground for EU fans, and then whatever you do with Rey in the films will feel monumental because you're still doing this character-focused stuff here, while still allowing her to have big, big story and seeing her grow through the decades. So, that's how I would do it. It seems like we're already getting some comics and tie-ins already now with the sequels. It seems like they're already starting to set the foundation there, but that's how I'd look at it. do all that stuff, and then if you can, make those Legends stories finalized. Connect the missing pieces there. That's how I look at it.
Yeah, and the great pink pillow in the comments says Star Wars Resistance era was awesome. I wish for more content of them fighting the First Order remains. And that's goes back to the commitment thing. It's like they were so 150% all in on the sequels, right? They made a big mistake that I think for their theme parks, they're still trying to figure out and rectify. We just Luke Skywalker just showed up at the Galaxy's Edge, so like they're
Yeah.
really starting to tear down the sequel theming there. But they were so all in that they were like, everything is sequel trilogy. Everything we put out is sequel trilogy. We're not going to really talk about anything else, and if we do, it's only going to be original trilogy. Now that was a mistake mainly just because when you go to a theme park, right, and it's Star Wars land, you want to see the thing that's most iconically Star Wars, which will always be the original trilogy. Yeah, everybody will have their favorites across everything, but that's the thing that started it. So they messed up there, and they messed up originally doubling, tripling down on the sequel trilogy, but that kind of scared them from now being like, okay, no sequel trilogy. Because basically, since Rise of Skywalker, we've had nothing about the sequel trilogy. I was kind of excited for Celebration. One of my mini stories today, if we had more time, was going to be talking about how Oscar Isaac's now no longer going to Star Wars Celebration. But I was excited that Celebration was going to be kind of celebrating the 10th anniversary of Force Awakens and bringing that back, because the sequel era out of the three is my least favorite, but they still can do so much there that they haven't touched, and they were just so all in for 5 years on sequels. And then the last 6 years, they've been so out on the sequels because of public perception that the only thing sequel adjacent we've really gotten is the Ray announcement. But they haven't gone in with that. That's still in kind of, you know, flux. They've lost 3 writers. We haven't heard any concrete information since they announced it. So there's just so much lack of trust on their eras, right? And I think that's been one of the big things. And yes, Star Wars is an expansive universe, so you can't always like give everything a shot. You've got to focus on what works. And right now, New Republic, Mandalorian, that stuff has been working. But the whole thing with the sequels is that you make them, and like Sanak was saying earlier, they all come out within a year on the timeline, right? They release in 3 years across 4 years in real life, and they all take place within 1 year on the timeline, which is already congested period of time, considering the original trilogy took place across 5 years. The prequel trilogy took place across 13 years. It's the most congested period of a Star Wars trilogy, and then yet you do that congested period, a lot changes in the galaxy, and then you never give us any epilogue, you never give us any aftermath of that story, you never give us any prologue to that story. It's just been this like era of mystery. And like I said on a video about Mara Jade coming back and kind of connecting all that stuff in the past too, there's so much time between even where we are right now with Mandalorian to The Force Awakens. There's still 23 years worth of time, if we're still to believe that everything in The Mandalorian, Ahsoka, and Boba Fett takes place in 1 year, which I don't buy. But if we're still to believe that, there's 23 years worth of time to fill in those gaps. We haven't even gotten close to that. The only thing we've gotten close to post sequel trilogy is Shadow of the Sith, which takes place, I believe, 12 years before Force Awakens. So there's still so much time, right? They just have not committed to giving us anything pre or post sequels to make that era better. And that's the thing with commitment, is like, if you want that to be an era people love, if you want us to fall in love with the Rey character, if you want us to fall in love over again with the sequel characters, or you want that excitement to be back like it was 10 years ago when The Force Awakens came out, you have to keep it fresh in people's mind. You have to keep giving us story and reasons to love it. Part of the reason the prequels, people fell in love with them, is because there was another generation that fell in love with those characters via Clone Wars. There was another generation that fell in love with those characters via memes. There was all these things that kept those movies alive. There's not much keeping the sequels alive. And it's one of the reasons I think the perpetuation of this angst and anger towards them has continued even 6 years down the line, is the fact that there's nothing to redeem them because there's nothing to continue or perpetuate that story. It just feels like this outlier part of the timeline. And even, those people who are like, just get rid of the sequels and, retcon them and get rid of them. The only thing that gives slight credence to that is the fact that nothing touches them, right? Like they're such their own unique island of Star Wars that if you don't connect them to the larger universe a bit better, or you don't continue those stories, then it just continues to give people that ammunition that, like, yeah, they don't believe in them and they don't believe in that time period. And so that's the only positive of like the Rey movie being announced is, yeah, I still think it's a controversial direction, a controversial decision to lead a movie with Rey because of the aftermath. Whereas if you made her a supporting character, which some of the rumors is that she is a supporting character, but if you made her a supporting character, we could re-fall in love with that character and then you can lead movies with her. Um, even even if with those issues, going back to that character is important because that means you have faith in your future storytelling around that era. But thank you for the question. It's going to wrap up our stream. We went a lot longer than usual tonight because of that question. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the stream. Thank you so much for watching. We will be back next Tuesday for another live stream, taking your guys' questions, talking about the Star Wars news. Hopefully we will have another stream that we get to answer a lot of your guys' questions. It will probably be the last stream that is specifically dedicated, to answering your guys' questions for a while, because after that, we will have Andor for the next 4 weeks. We are planning on doing at least one stream during Star Wars Celebration. We won't be there, but we're planning on doing at least one stream that weekend reacting to the Star Wars Celebration news. We still haven't committed yet on whether we are going to be doing 2 or 3 or one each day reacting to all the news, but we will be doing at least one. But that will probably be more news and Star Wars focused. So if you want to ask questions like tonight about movies or about board games or whatever you wanted to ask us questions about, bring them next week, because that will be your last time for about 4 weeks until we get into middle to late May when Andor ends. And then we'll be back to this format again. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that. Thank you so much for watching. If you're watching right now, and we have a lot more people watching right now than have liked the video, make sure you like the video, subscribe for more content just like this. We have videos coming out usually at least once, sometimes 2 times a week. Every Friday you'll get a video for sure. And then this last few weeks, we've been posting at least 2 videos a week. Shorts every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, polls twice a day, every day. So keep an eye out for all that content. Join us every Tuesday for the live streams as well. If you haven't checked out some of our recent content, we did have the Tales of the Underworld reaction. We did have recently the discussion about will Luke show up in the Heir to the Empire movie. And then also I finally posted, and I know I had a lot of people asking about this, finally got a chance to post the complete Star Wars Legends timeline part 6, the Rebellion Era, A New Hope. Check that out. I'm hard at work on the Empire Strikes Back episode as well. That should be a lot shorter. So that will be coming out hopefully soon. Currently also working on the characters that could show up in Andor, because that was another one you guys asked about. That will be coming out next week sometime as well. So thank you guys so much for watching tonight. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and we will see you all next week for more live Q&A and news.